four of us who will be doing. John Conforti will start off first, and actually we put that into written format, and we'll have that online also. So, obviously take whatever notes you want, but it's all in writing, so to save you from having to do that.
Is that what you were calling me?
Yeah, I was returning your text.
Yes. Yeah. If we have a break, I want to fill you. No. We'll we'll coordinate after. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should go over there too.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much.
It doesn't matter.
So with that,
Okay. Your Honor, members of council, thank you for letting us present on the council orientation. So I will be the first one up here. As Tom said, we're going to be tag teaming this, but in looking at the agenda, I will be covering the first three bullets, which is the authority of the city council and your rules and procedures, really the nuts and bolts of how you operate. RSA 91A, which is very important, will be focusing primarily on the open meetings portion of 91A, since 91A governs all of our meetings that we may have, with some limited exceptions that we'll talk about. And then I'll go through some ethics rules that are applicable to the city council, both in the charter, in the ethics ordinance, and then in your own rules. And so I have a lot of slides. I'm going to tell you that right now. I am going to not go through each one in depth. I did a run of show at one point, and I think it was 2 hours, and I bored myself. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to move through things relatively quickly. As Tom said, we're presenting you with the written product so that you can go back to it and take a look at it. I'm going to pause after each of these three sections for questions, but also it may take some time to go through this to look at particular documents, and you may want to come back and ask questions, and certainly we're available to do that. So I will go through sort of the broad authority of the city council, from a top-down approach relatively quickly. So as you may remember from your civics class back in high school or middle school, the federal government and state government are dual sovereigns. Theoretically, one is not more powerful than the other. They just operate in different fields, and so they are co-sovereigns. I want to just make sure you're aware that with regard to the state and municipalities, that is not the case. It's unfortunate. This is a little bit of a depressing start to the show here. But unfortunately, as a municipality, we are considered a creature of the state. We are only endowed with the powers that they deign to give us, and they can change those at any given time. And it's something that you should be aware of. So what does that look like? Well, we have a constitutional authority for the legislature to allow us to govern ourselves through charter. They've granted that to us through RSA 49B1. However, both the constitutional provision and this RSA state that our charter has to be in compliance with state laws, the general laws and the state constitution. So why am I telling you this? Well, the general laws change all the time, every year. And when Councilor Schultz and her colleagues decide that they want to make zoning changes, we have to review our zoning ordinances and look to see if they are still in compliance. If they are not, then the state law governs. So you will see as we come to you, we will be changing our ordinances from time to time to come into compliance with state law. It's just important for you to understand that we do live in a world where the state gives us the powers, and then they can change those, they can remove those, they can add those. They're not necessarily much in the appetite to add recently, but this is really just a very, very high level. If you're interested in digging into the RSAs, the traditional grants of authority to cities and towns are in RSA 31 to 53, and that's a lot of information. That's a one of those old legal books that you would look at. It's a whole volume and a half. I don't suggest you go into those. It's just an example of, yes, the state gives us authority. Those are included both in this chunk of RSAs, but really throughout the laws, the RSAs, the general laws. So just to be aware of, The state can change what they grant and what they don't grant. We do have authorities that are indicated in RSA, and you may want to be interested in about where, when we do something, when we do an ordinance or things like that, where does that authority come from? It's generally going to be in an RSA somewhere in state law. Okay. So we've been granted authority to enact a city charter. We have done so since 1853, and the last time we revised it was in 1992. A city charter is like the Constitution for the municipality. It governs, it essentially sets out how we govern ourselves. And I would very much recommend that you all review it and read it because it is actually very legible. It was, again, it's modernized. It's been reviewed recently. It's only, I think, 11 pages long. So it is very easy to get into. It's not, it's not stuck with legalese and things like that. So I absolutely would encourage you to review it and keep it with you and refer to it periodically. This is just a general overview of how that charter is laid out. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but as you can see, there are certain provisions that relate to elections, then how the governing body is composed, what the terms are, who's on it, how many at large, how many wards, that sort of thing. So you can use this just as a guideline to go dig into these if you would like. But I'm going to call out a few charter provisions that I do want to discuss and think are worth hitting. So first one is meetings. Meetings are how you govern yourself, right? How you act. And that is prescribed in the charter. And the time is prescribed in the charter. It's the second Monday of each month unless it gets bounced by a holiday. So we will talk about very specifically what happens in the meetings, how the agenda is laid out, how you can operate for each of these things, such as ordinances, which is section 19. Ordinances are the laws of the city, and how do those get enacted, how they get reviewed. We'll go through that whole process. General powers, I just wanted to add this in here so that it echoes what we talked about in that you as a city council have the powers that are vested in both city councils, board of aldermen, selectmen. So when you go look through the RSAs, if you're interested in that, the powers that are granted to towns are also granted to cities and vice versa. Now, cities and towns organize themselves differently, so there may be instances where something that applies to a town won't apply to a city or will apply to it differently because they have different legislative bodies. In a town, the legislative body is usually the voters themselves. But in general, if you see a law that says a board of selectmen or the board of aldermen or the city council has this authority, that is the authority that's been granted to you under the charter. So the next provision I want to talk about is, it's entitled non-interference by the city council, but I really want to call out the first sentence here. So I think it's very important for you guys to understand. City council shall act in all matters as a body. Your authority is to act as a group with a quorum. Each of you individually have been elected. However, you don't have the authority of the body individually. You can only act as a group. And this will come up multiple times as we talk about going to meetings, presenting at meetings or testifying at meetings where you're not a member of the public body. You have to be very careful. I want you to be aware and mindful of the fact that, yes, you are a counselor, but the powers and authorities of the council belong to the group acting together, not to any individuals. So with that in mind, there's some guidance here about individuals not seeking to interfere with the management of the city manager, who is responsible for the day-to-day management of the city. And certainly you can ask questions, you can make suggestions or recommendations, but there is a strict prohibition on interfering with the operations as an individual. Your oversight of the city manager and subsequently the oversight of the departments that he runs is as a group, not as an individual. So important to remember Okay, in addition to the city charter, you have rules that you've adopted. Unlike the city charter, which has to be enacted by the voters, council can amend its own rules and can do so with a 2/3 vote. We've had a couple of amendments in the last few months, so this is something that's more of a living document. But again, very small, very easy to read. It's only about 5 pages, and it really does lay out point by point how the city council operates. And so we want to talk about the conduct of the meeting, which is how is outlined in the council rules. So when we come to meeting, the mayor, or if the mayor is not here, the mayor pro tem, who I understand you selected on Monday, will preside over the meeting. What does that mean? They are Mr. Mayor is the person who decides on all questions of order. He is the one who recognizes people to speak, and he is the one responsible for keeping the meeting moving and keeping the agenda in order. So he is, again, he sets the tone of the meeting, and he is the one who can recognize you to speak. He can set timelines on public hearings in terms of how long he wants to allow people to testify. So it's important to understand that is his role in the proceedings. So no person shall address the council until they are recognized by the mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think, likes to be had attention brought by, I think, just a hand raise, but it's really up to him ultimately how he wants you to identify that you'd like to speak. And at that point, when he identifies you to speak, that is when you have the floor, but not before that. Okay, the conduct of the meeting in terms of the agenda, that is set out very specifically in the rules. There is a point by point of what comes where. I'm not going to go through that because you can read, but there's a couple things that, again, I just want to highlight as we go through this. We go through the preliminaries, and then we go to what's called the consent agenda. And what is a consent agenda? Well, the rules just say consent agenda can be various reports from departments or other items as council determines. I think traditionally what is put on consent agenda are items that don't need public hearing, that can be decided, that the staff may feel that can be decided without debate or discussion. And you can remove items from consent agenda, and we're going to talk about the exact process for that. But if items remain on the consent agenda, they get voted on in a batch. If we have 20 items on there, the motion will be to approve the consent agenda. At that point, those items are approved. And we move on to the next piece of this. So just want you to understand, again, what is the consent agenda? How do you remove those? We'll get through in a future slide.
Do you want questions now, or you want to?
I was going to wait until we get to the end of this section,
Okay.
and then
Let's get to the end of this section.
before we transition over to 91A,
Great.
we'll stop and go over all of these.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. With regard to, we'll go through the rest of this. Again, this is all in the rules of what comes after. Next, we'll talk about how public hearings and then ordinances get decided. Just to call out number 11, the meeting is supposed to be concluded by 11 o'clock unless the council suspends the rules. So that is in the rules itself. And we have had instances where we've gone up against that. Sometimes we've gone forward. Sometimes we've decided to recess to another day, just to make you aware that that does happen. Okay, so ordinances and resolutions, as we talked about, ordinances are the laws of the city. Resolutions are the manner in which the city council authorizes particular items, most specifically appropriations. And so what you will see on your agenda usually is that the first time you see an ordinance or resolution will be the month before you actually act on it. It will appear on the agenda Again, because there is a requirement that there be a first reading and that it be laid on the table. There's a notice of public hearing, which has to happen at least 10 days before. We typically have, put the public on notice in January that we are going to be taking this up for a public hearing in February, so they're aware that that is going to be happening. Then at the February meeting, we have the second reading after the public hearing. The public hearing is the only time when the public has an absolute right to speak at a city council meeting. There is not a requirement for public comment outside of that. And so there also are limitations that can be had on public hearings. In our rules, the mayor may determine to truncate any testimony on that. There's a default of 5 minutes, but it can be moved depending on what the mayor would like to do. After the second reading, and then amendments, questions, discussions, which we're going to talk about, then you vote on the passage. So what does debate look like? So we've had the public hearing, we have an ordinance, there's a motion needs to be made to approve or deny the ordinance, the question before the body. So one of the counselors needs to make a motion. It needs to be seconded in order to go to discussion. A second does not mean that you agree. It just means that you want to proceed with discussion of the item. So if you have a motion before you to approve an item and you're not so sure that you want to approve the item, but you think it's worth discussing, you can second that. That does not lock you into voting for the item. Once it's seconded, then there is debate, as we said. The mayor presides over that debate. He will recognize people in turn, and debate can continue for as long as the body wants. It can be closed at any time by one counselor calling for debate to end and for the question to be decided, and a 2/3 vote to close debate and move forward to answering the question. During debate, there are 4 motions that can be had at any time. There's to adjourn, to lay on the table for a future meeting, to amend, and if you do make a motion to amend, again, that needs a second. That in and of itself starts the whole process of debate again. And then the last motion is to lay on the table indefinitely. I just want to make you aware of, if you do move to lay on the table indefinitely and that motion gets approved, that item is gone for the rest of the council term. So let's say on Monday when we meet, if somebody wanted to lay on the table indefinitely, that cannot be taken up again until January of 2028. So it's not a motion that I've seen while I've been here. I don't know that it is, it's often used, but it is there and it is in the rules. So, and it is a motion that is available during debate. There is a provision that the mayor can require that motions be in writing. That has traditionally not been done. I don't know that the mayor would so choose, but that is available to him. So, other items around voting. When a vote is called, any counselor can ask that a roll call be taken. And at that point, the clerk will call the roll, starting with the person who asked for the roll call vote, and then we'll proceed to the normal alphabetical order. Reconsideration, I just want to take a quick time to discuss this. So, you've had a long night, you've approved a bunch of ordinances, and you go home that night and you say, oh my God, we screwed up. I can't believe that zoning ordinance is going to ruin the city. I knew we shouldn't have approved a 50-story skyscraper. So if you are on the prevailing side, you voted on the prevailing side. So we've approved a 50-story skyscraper. You voted yes on that. You can move to reconsider that vote at any of the next 2 regular meetings. So If you voted against it and you just think, these guys are turkeys, if I gotta tell them again, you want another bite at the apple, that you cannot make that motion. Can only be made by the prevailing side. And we reconsider. We don't rescind action. We reconsider action. There might be instances where reconsideration is going to be moot because if we have agreed to enter into a contract and we've executed that contract, that's going to be very difficult for us to reconsider. And then you're going to have me at the table telling you that we may have some legal problems if you reconsider on things like that. So let's say you go 3 meetings and you don't reconsider your 50-story skyscraper, but in the middle of the summer you decide we really screwed that one up. It can be brought back to the table, but it needs to be done with a 2/3 vote to reconsider or to bring that item back before the council again. And then we talked about what happens if you move to table indefinitely. Okay. Nominations, you're going to have in front of you many nominations for boards and commissions. Those have to be to you at least 15 days before they can be acted upon. And then this is a new rule that we have that just codified existing practice, which is that the mayor can create ad hoc committees. Things come up where we think that there may need to be committees or working groups that need to look at these things. The mayor has authority to create those and to make the appointments to those committees independently on his own. Okay. Timing. So if you want to get something in before the council, it has to be in before 5 p.m. on the Monday preceding the meeting. There is the ability to add late items by suspending that rule by a 2/3 vote. And then with regard to consent, as we talked about, once you see the consent agenda, you have the ability to remove consent to say we want to have debate on this item, or you have questions on an item. You have to do so before noon on the day of the city council meeting. So usually that's Monday before noon. That has to be done by reaching out to Janice. That is important to us as staff because we bring the people who we know need to be here to answer questions. So if it's something is on consent, then we may not have them here. So it is important for us to get noticed and make sure that the appropriate people are here to answer your questions. I think this is subconscious, but I brought the 11 o'clock rule up again just to, it's just on my mind apparently.
Nobody want to be here.
No, I agree. And then as I said a couple times, the rules allow for suspension of the rules at any time for 2/3 vote. Again, if this is most often used on, we have an important item that was that's late, but we think it's important. It's time sensitive. We don't want to wait till the next month. Certainly, you could bring it forward with 2/3. Okay, so that is the end of council rules, authority, procedures. So I will pause, take a break, take a water, and I'll take questions.
I think Councilor Schlosser has a question.
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Councilor Schultz.
Real quick, so on the timing and process part that you were just talking about, it says before 5 p.m. on the Monday preceding the meeting. Is that before 5 p.m. of the day of the meeting?
Nope,
Or the week before, right?
No, the week before, the Monday preceding the meeting. So for Monday's meeting, it would have been last Monday. So it's the week. That is when items need to be in for consideration to be added to the agenda.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Okay, I have 2. The first is about the consent agenda. So the consent agenda, because we're pulling it to either ask questions, raise awareness, that doesn't need a second. Is that correct? That's different from the public hearing.
That's correct. So the polling from consent is done before the meeting. It's not part of the meeting. It's not a motion or anything like that.
No, what I mean is, I'm sorry, I'm just chewing. When we begin discussing the consent agenda, it doesn't need, like, let's say Stacy Brown or Councilor Brown pulled this item from consent. I don't need a second to talk about that. or ask questions. Because I pulled it from consent for discussion, there's no need to make a motion for a consent agenda item.
Could I
No.
answer that, Mr. Conforti?
What's that?
Could I answer that?
Yes,
Or
please.
Comment on that?
Sure.
Moving forward, starting this term, I will be requiring a motion and a second before we begin discussing something on a
You're-
consent, on something pulled from consent.
Can you like, because I'm thinking, there are times that I don't have an opportunity to ask staff questions. So there's a report and like I need clarification. This has happened a couple of times. So, you know, I don't understand what the motion would be in that
Motion
case.
would be either make a motion to pass, to adopt it, or make a motion to
Well, but I
kill
wouldn't
it.
know, like, I'm trying to clarify, like, if I don't understand, like, there was, I can't remember exactly which
Yeah.
report, but I know there was a report that I didn't understand, and I needed clarification to determine if I wanted to approve it or not. So that's why I'm thinking, everything that I've read, consent agenda items.
Counselor, here's my thinking, and let me tell you, first of all, since you usually receive the agenda on the Wednesday before, if there are questions and
It's not
clarification.
usually it's like Thursday.
Counselor, please don't interrupt me. Thanks, I won't interrupt you.
Okay.
That there are opportunities to direct questions to staff through department heads if there are questions that need to be answered beforehand. However, I don't want to get into a situation where we have endless questions about something. Members of this body become frustrated at the length of time that's going on, and we have a situation occur like we had in November, which is very confusing. It's much cleaner if somebody's going to pull something from consent to start with a motion to either approve or to not approve, and then go into the discussion phase where questions may be asked.
I need clarification. Are you saying that, so if I pull an item from consent because I don't understand it, let's say I have the ACFR was a big one. That was
Sure.
like, I don't know,
Sure.
hundreds of pages.
Sure.
And I did speak with Mr. LeBrun, but other people may have questions as we're going through it. So if I pull it and I say, okay, I don't want to approve this right now, you know, are you saying I need a second in order to discuss a consent agenda?
Correct, because that's when we discuss an item. We discuss items when something goes through public hearing. And then during something that's on the agenda for public hearing, goes through public hearing. Then we go to the public hearing action phase. And we require a motion before we start to discuss that item. And so I'm merely going to require the same procedure if something is pulled from consent, because now that you pull something from consent, it now has to go for an individual separate vote. And it's going to require a motion in order to go to that vote. Therefore, before we launch into questions and answers and all of that, I'm going to require a motion be made to either pass or not to pass an item so that we have a platform on which discussion and questions can take place.
If Your Honor, that doesn't make sense. Like, so you're saying that I pull something from consent and then I have to get like if I'm pulling it to get more information, you're saying I need to have someone second it at that moment in order to discuss it? Because that's typically a public hearing, or that's typically what happens during something.
During public hearing action.
Right. but this
Before we
is
take a
consent.
vote. And if something has been pulled, that means now we're going to be putting it into place where we're going to have to vote on it one way or another. Because normally we would have voted upon it on the consent calendar, voting with all of those. Now we're taking it out separately. We're bringing it before the body. And in order to maintain order, we need to have a motion and a second, so that then we can start to ask questions, have discussion on the item.
Your Honor, my concern is, let's say I pull something, and what if I don't get a second?
Well,
Then we don't discuss a consent agenda item?
Counselor, I would find it very unusual that there not be a second on either a motion to kill it or to pass it. One way or another, there's going to be a second.
But Your Honor, don't I need to, I'm taking it off, I'm taking an item from consent, and then in order to ask questions, there has to be a second. So I'm going to say, I pulled this from consent.
Counselor, I'm saying in order to proceed with the item, we need to have a motion and a second. We're not going to do anything on that until we have a motion and a second. We're going to have to take some action on that item regardless. Whether you have questions or not have questions, there's going to have to be action on that, which is going to take place one way, whether somebody makes a motion to pass or to kill it before you make questions, ask questions, or afterwards. There has to be that. Counselor
Thank you.
Reddick.
Mr. Conforti, someone can just withdraw their motion, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Can I make it?
Counselor Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I make the suggestion, because I feel like this discussion is valuable and important for the business of our meeting, but this is an orientation.
Right.
Could we defer this
Let's
part of the
defer this.
conversation since it's
Yes.
about our
Yeah.
ongoing
Counselor,
business?
Yes.
Counselor, sit back, please. Counselor Schultz, I'm happy to defer this. I was just trying to create a clarification because it
Thank
had relevance to the question
Right,
that the council
right.
was asking. All right. Counselor Davy,
I have 3 questions, sorry.
you can go right ahead. This is your orientation, believe it or not.
My first one is related to Counselor Brown's. I already lost my train of thought. The suspending the rule for the amount of time needed to add something to the agenda after the deadline, when does that vote occur?
You can move to suspend the rules at any time to add an item. I think typically, for notice purposes, we would want to have something on the agenda, even if it comes after that deadline, to add as what we call a suspense item. Go ahead.
So what happens generally, city clerk will put on the agenda, do a revised agenda on, say, Monday, right?
Yep.
Something comes out, and you'll see that, and there'll be an item, right, usually at the end that says, items for suspense.
Okay.
So it'll actually say suspense.
But we'll vote in the moment to hear it or not hear it.
When you get through all the agenda, you get to that point, you have to decide whether or not to actually suspend that item. If you decide not to, we don't talk about it. If you decide to do it, then we suspend.
Got it. My second question is, what constitutes an emergency for the 3 days for the notice instead of the 10 days?
I think I don't know what the I don't have that in front
That's
of me
okay.
right now. I can get back to you on
That's
what
okay.
the guidelines are and what constitutes an emergency.
Or like weather or pandemic or something?
I mean, no, I think it's a question of, so for example, we have a bridge collapse and we need to
Got it.
get
Emergency,
funding
yeah,
for
yeah.
it immediately. So it would be something along
straw
those
thing.
lines of, there isn't enough time to have the norm. There's enough of a exigent need to act by the body. But I don't want to answer that off the top of
That's
my head
okay.
because
That's okay.
there are very specific things that are indicated for each type of emergency when under 91A, like when you can meet in an emergency or not. But that would generally be what it is.
Okay.
Just so, it's very usual to do, we've only done it a few times, but if I remember correctly, it takes 8 city councilors to do that, to make that decision, or the city manager to decide whether or not. So if I wanted to call a special meeting, I could call a special meeting and you would show up.
Yeah.
So,
My third question is our agenda order common?
Common among other cities and towns. I think it is, based on my experience with other municipalities, including my own. It's a fairly standard outline. I think we have a few more items than others, but yes.
Thank you.
Counselor Caleb, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so.
it's early.
Yeah, it's early. This stuff is, you're explaining it very well, and I'm taking notes. But I will raise my hand though if I do.
Good.
I
There's
won't
not-
be shy.
It is not a one shot,
Yeah.
This is a start of a process to review, and certainly
Right.
questions afterward would be more than welcome.
Counselor
So,
Horn? Counselor Horn has a
oh,
question.
sorry.
For the reconsideration, is that something we would have to ask to be put on the agenda?
It is. So that would be its own item on the agenda to reconsider. Yep.
Question?
I think they asked all the question. Now, my only question is on the ad hoc committees.
Yep.
Is there a time limit on those committees or just as
there isn't under the rules, but the best practice is to sunset ad hoc committees, so that we have, it should be for a defined task.
That's
To
okay.
say, we're gonna do a study on X and it's going to retire at this time, because we have had ad hoc committees that sort of linger on the books, they haven't met in years, so it would be, again, it's not prescribed in the rule itself, but it would be best practice to sunset those at a particular time based on either a date certain or a event certain.
Just as a follow-up on what we were talking about, you said earlier that you don't have to, which we all know, that's clear that you can second something even if you are not voting for that item, just so that we will get the opportunity to discuss.
Yes.
So really what we were talking about earlier on the consent agenda, somebody pulled it, somebody seconded it. If that's what the mayor require now to second, this is not something that is written in our rules, it's just based on what this body decide to do.
It's one of those Robert's rules that we sort of fill in the gaps between our rules. The Robert's rules are sort of the general accepted rules of procedure for bodies. So yeah, seconds are again, sometimes people get concerned about seconding a motion because they're not sure that they want to vote for it. Just want to make clear that seconding it is just forwarding it for debate, not necessarily an agreement with the motion that's pending.
Okay, Councilor Brown.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Caleb.
Oh, she can go.
Did
No,
this
no,
No,
no.
sound-
you, this orientation is.
Oh, okay. No, it's not a huge question by any means. So for the consent agenda, so on or before noon the day of the city council meeting, councilor may remove any item from consent by request. But I know when sometimes I look at an agenda when it is released on the Thursday or whatever before the meeting, and it'll say some item was pulled from consent by X counselor. Now, say I pulled something on like Friday or Monday of the council meeting. Does the agenda, like the public agenda, get updated, or is it just like yes? So like on the website and stuff, it is updated to reflect that. Okay.
I think,
Thank you.
on Monday
Gotcha.
after the timeline has come and gone for pulling items from
Right.
consent, usually there's an updated agenda which identifies any
Okay.
items that have been
Okay.
pulled.
I see. Thank you.
And the
And
council.
those are taken up after the other business, so it's down at the bottom of the
Right.
agenda.
Okay.
Councilor Brown?
So nominations, this is the second question that I had. If we get them and it's, we have them for 15 days, but we discover, this happened before where I discovered that someone had lied a couple of times on his resume. What is the right time to, bring up that concern? Because then, the next time we meet, so 15 days is, right in the middle between meetings.
Well, the notice is the 15 days before you would take action on the nomination. So the time to, if you have a concern about the nomination, is to take that action at the next meeting.
At that meeting, so
Yes.
you would pull it from consent.
You would.
Okay.
But but we also want to treat nominations confidentially. We don't necessarily discuss them in body, right? I mean, we
Normally.
try not to discuss about citizens' foibles or whatever, or what we think. So we would bring our concerns to you or something, or to the city manager, and then figure out how to deal with it.
Correct.
I mean, that's the preferred way to address any concerns about nominations.
Right.
That is, well, we'll go into exceptions to 91.
Okay,
We can
right,
discuss that. Okay, I'll try to pick up the pace because we have a lot left. And, we're a long way in. So, right to know law. So, under New Hampshire Constitution and then New Hampshire law, the public has a right to the greatest access possible to the actions, discussions, and records of the public. That is the default rule. Everything that we do is open to the public. Every document that we touch is open to the public. There are exceptions, but the rule is applied broadly. The exceptions are applied quite narrowly. So it's important always to remember that our actions should be out in public. Deliberations, any action that you take as a group needs to be in public with the very limited exceptions. So meetings of public bodies have to have notice and be open to the public. Notice needs to be given at least 24 hours in advance, and we take care of that for you, but it's got to be posted into public places, one which is the city's website. And what is a public body? Really, this obviously is a public body, but then your subcommittees, advisory committees, working groups of advisory committees, all of those are subject to 91A. So what is a meeting? Well, really it means you have a quorum and you're together to take action or discuss your public body's business. So if you guys all go to Tandy's after this and talk about your kids and grandkids and your holidays, that is not a meeting, that's not the public business. If a small subset of you goes off and talks about what happened tonight, that is not a meeting. There are reasons why it might not be advisable that we'll get into down the road, but you have to have those two elements, which is quorum and business of the public body. So where do we get into trouble? Emails and texts mostly. So you get a email to everybody saying, here's the agenda for the meeting on Monday, and you reply all and say, item number 31 is a disaster. We shouldn't be, doing this. And it doesn't have to be that inflammatory, but as soon as you have a communication with everyone where you're discussing the business of the body, you are in violation of 91A because it is not open to the public. It has not been noticed. You really need to be careful with emails and texts. Emails and texts can be useful in terms of administrative matters, disseminating documents, scheduling matters. That should be it. Your emails and texts should be as boring as possible. And do not think that just because you don't have a quorum on your email chain at the moment that you are out of the woods, because the second that gets forwarded to someone else, you now can have sequential communications that get to a quorum that then makes it a public meeting. Or a meeting. And this happens all the time. I'm on an advisory board in my own town. I've seen it three times and had to say, you guys need to stop. You can't reply all. This will probably be less of a problem for you in this group because you are professional legislators who know what you're doing. When you get into your subgroups and if you sit on planning board or zoning board, things like that, it's something to filter that down to everybody to make sure that they're all doing the right thing with regard to 91A. Okay, so everything is public except non-meetings and non-public meetings. So we talked about sort of non-meetings where it's a chance social encounter or you guys are at Midnight Merriment or whatever, what have you, where that you're not doing business, that's not a meeting. There's also what's called a scheduled non-meeting. That's a consultation with legal counsel. That is a meeting to discuss negotiation for collective bargaining. This will look like this, so it might be before a meeting, but it is not technically a meeting. There are no minutes taken at that meeting. Obviously, the public is not invited because it is completely confidential. It's not considered a meeting under 91A. We actually end up noticing our non-meetings because we have them as usually before our non-public and our public meeting. We're not required to do that. They are not meetings under 91A, but we are very transparent in that regard. So non-meetings, very limited. Again, CBAs and consultations with attorneys. Non-public meetings, these are exceptions to the public meeting requirement that are specifically carved out in 91A3. I do not suggest that right now you go dig into 91A3, but if you are interested, they are enumerated. I've put a few down here, and I'm really only going to call out one because it's the one that's done most often. That is buying, selling, or leasing real or personal property. Those negotiations do not have to happen in public if they're going to create a disadvantage, which often they would. So when we are buying or selling property, we will often be in non-public to have those discussions. So again, that is a meeting in every other sense other than the public being there. So has to be noticed, minutes have to be taken. In terms of all the other requirements that we say about the motions and seconding and all that procedure, all of that takes place. The only difference is that the public is not there. The minutes that are kept from a non-public can be sealed. They have to be sealed with a 2/3 vote, and we'll talk about the mechanics of how that happens. If they are not, then they are available in 72 hours. Generally, if you're going through the hassle of doing a non-public meeting and you have a justification for doing that under 91A3, you should probably seal the minutes as well. I can think of very few instances where you would bother to do a 91A3 meeting and then say, it's all right, just let the public know exactly what's going on, because that doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're letting those minutes out, you probably didn't need to be in a non-public. There is a set procedure for going into non-public. It has to be by roll call vote. Then the majority of the members need to vote to go into non-public. Again, we keep the minutes. Once we vote to come out of non-public, which is not by roll call vote for some reason, the vote on whether to seal the minutes has to happen in public session. And again, if they're not sealed, they are released, and that is a 2/3 vote that needs to be to seal those minutes. We will be talking to you about non-public minutes. We do need to periodically review them and then decide whether they still need to be confidential. So, for example, if we bought a property in 2007, in our negotiations finished in late 2006, we probably don't need to have that sealed anymore. So we have to go through those, bring them back to you, and unseal them. And so we actually will be talking about a policy for that. Okay, very quick. You can attend remotely under 91A if you have a quorum that is present in a physical location, and two, the person it's reasonably impractical for them to attend. You can't attend remotely just because you don't feel like it. You have to have a good reason why you can't actually get to the location of the meeting. If someone is attending remotely, they have to identify where they are, who's with them. They have to be able to communicate and be heard simultaneously by all the members. You do not need to set up a Zoom or a remote public access because any individual member or members are remote. Their access to the meeting is in the physical space where the quorum is. I know during COVID, we did that as a matter of course. You don't need to do that just because one member or a certain body of members are not going to be physically. Open to the public means open to the public. The public can come, they can record, they can video. They can do pretty much anything that does not interfere with the operation of the meeting. Their right is to transparency so that they can see what is happening, but they cannot interfere. They don't have a general right to participate. Again, outside of public hearings, we don't have a general comment period, and that is not required under 91A. We are required to have minutes, which are available within 5 days. Okay, very edge case. I'm just going to bring it up just so you're aware that it exists. If you feel like a 91A is being violated in a meeting, you can make an objection and then continue to conduct the meeting, to participate in the meeting. That would shield you from some of the penalties that we're going to talk about down the road. I've never seen it done in 14 years of working in state or municipal government, but it is there. 91A, courts take this very seriously. I used to work for the current Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I know he believes very strongly this is one of the most important laws on the books. The most seen violation or remedy that's given is attorney's fees if they feel like a body is not acting properly and know that they should be doing better. But they can go further. They can go to fines. They can enjoin future procedures of the body. They can make you undergo remedial training. And if you are willfully destroying information to prevent it from being inspected or disclosed, you can be guilty of a misdemeanor. So if Counselor X is in the back shredding documents, we have a problem. We probably have an ethical problem as well, so we'll have to talk about that. So that's a good segue into the ethics rules, but I'll stop on 91A so you can ask any questions about that.
Councilor Davey.
Counselor Secco
it's
was
your
first.
night.
I'm giving precedence to the two new councilors.
No worries.
How does staff make a determination for communications with BCCing on an email versus just one big email that everyone can see who got emailed?
It's a good question. I don't know how Janice decides whether to have a BCC. I think if you get in all counselor communication, I think it's fair to assume that it's gone to a mailing group, not just to you individually.
My other question was, I should know this from my day job in the public sector, but what is like best practice for level of details of minutes that are taken? Because like I've seen some really small towns that are like bullet points and like like it's all different.
Yeah,
styles.
I mean it's does not need to be extensive. It certainly does not need to be verbatim. We have the benefit also of all of these things being recorded at this point, and so anybody can go back and look at it. So the idea is that there's a written record of the activity of the meeting, so that people can know, all right, what action was taken, who was there a motion made, who made the motion, was it approved, was it not approved. That's really ultimately, you're just looking for the bare bones. That is what is required. You're right. Certain places have like 3 bullet points. Some places have like novels.
Almost a transcript.
There are some requirements that Janice and the other clerks that you'll deal with are aware of about timing and making a note of who's recording the minutes. So there are some requirements under 91A, but in terms of the content, it is not very prescriptive.
Thank you.
Councilor Kaler.
Yeah. So, what should I do if there's a group chat or an email chain of 7 people and then I'm looped in on it? Just delete, remove myself, or is there like a course of action?
I would tell people that they should be that they should not be communicating on that channel, and you might want to make the clerk at the very least aware.
You can send it to
those
me or the clerk,
communications.
and we'll follow up and take the appropriate action.
So
Councilor Secco.
just to build on that, because she's talking about 7 or 6, there is no quorum, right? And earlier you said if we forward something here, say there is 4 of us, 5 of us, people are texting, and somebody forwarded, but the person they forwarded never is in the group or talk to somebody to have the quorum. So what will be your advice on that one?
I would advise you to be very careful about this, because courts have been clear, because there's a giant potential loophole, right? Oh, we don't have a quorum. Well, but I talk to you, and then you talk to Councilor Foote, and then Councilor Foote talks to Councilor Caleb, and we deliberate through the telephone game until we get our 8 votes, and then we walk in and then present. That is what the courts know can happen, does happen. They want to make sure that it's clear that sequential communication between less than a quorum that then ultimately reaches a quorum is a meeting, and that is going to be a violation. And I will say this with regard to group texts and things like that, you're right. If it's a group of 4, that is not a quorum.
Yeah.
But it only takes one person to forward that on to 4 more people, and you now have a quorum. Because if they can see what the text chain is, that is now sequential communication that they're aware of, and that is a potential violation.
Just for a follow-up.
Follow-up.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you said if there is 4, there's no quorum because we need 4 more, right?
Yep.
And then if they forward and they can get to see what you guys are reading, but have been talking about. But if that's not the case, they're just calling somebody to get an information, because most of the time I've seen it in many cities, things get done outside of the meeting, right?
Right.
Okay, and we always have said, as long as there is no quorum, people are safe. So I just want to clear this up because it's not, you are the expert on the law. We just want to make sure that as long as there's no 8 people to meet the quorum, people are okay.
If there is, so the law is,
That's it.
there's no meeting if there's not a quorum
Okay,
or you're not speaking about public business. What I am saying is that I have seen that where this goes south is, you think you have a text chain with 4 people and somebody goes and forwards it. Or they do one of these, hey, did you see this? This is how we're gonna vote tonight. The whole point of this, going back to the first principle, is all of your deliberations, all of your actions should be out in front of the public. That is the, and again, I don't mean, we all know you text with friends, you text with people, all those sorts of things. The core thing to keep in mind is that RSA 91A requires that your activity be out in front of the public and be visible. And so what they don't want is a back room, hey, how are we gonna vote on this? Well, what about this, what about that, what about this? Whether it happens in a physical back room, whether it happens in a digital back room. So I would be, again, the law is quorum and business, but I would remind all of you of the both the spirit and the intent of 91A is that deliberations are done in public, that your work is done in public. So I will leave it there.
Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you. Can you just also speak to polling of the council?
So I think that's a concern as well, because again, that is I think that is action or deliberation. It would be concerning to me.
Councilor Schultz.
I have a question, I guess, for Councilor Kretovic, because in,
She's asking you a question.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
I wanted to make sure.
because I just want to clarify your question so I can understand the answer. Does that include how we discuss things in non-meetings or non-public meetings?
No. So non-meetings or non-public meetings are exempt from these rules of deliberating in front of the public for a specific reason, right? A non-meeting is not a meeting at all, and a non-public meeting is not public because it qualifies for an exemption under 91A3. So those comments and those deliberations are shielded by law.
Councilor Curtis.
Michelle asked the same thing.
Ask you to say
Okay.
that, all of us, yeah.
Polling of the council is, how are you gonna vote on? That's a poll.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, ethics. All right. Again, I will try to move at some speed here. Okay, you are subject to ethics rules that exist in various locations, including the city charter, the ethics ordinance, and the council rules. The city charter has a couple of provisions that are specific with regard to ethics. No elected or appointed official or employee of the city shall take part in any decision concerning the business of the city in which the officer or employee has a financial interest aside from salary as such, direct or indirect, greater than any other citizen or taxpayer. So in other words, don't involve yourself in matters where you have a financial interest or a family member has a financial interest, and we'll talk about that more specifically. Private use of public property. Don't call general services to plow your driveway as much as you may wish to. So Article 161 of the Ethics Ordinance is this statement of intent. I put this in here especially because there's a statement that says that you're supposed to comply with both the letter and the spirit of the laws, which is important to this is the idea is that we are striving not just to be compliant with the law, but we are striving to be compliant with the spirit of these ordinances. So trying to get around them through technicalities, that is not what the ordinance is looking for. Okay, so the ethics ordinance deals with 5 different areas. We're going to go through those one by one. Probably the one that is most going to require most discussion is recusal on a conflict of interest. So when a matter comes before the city council where one of the counselors has a potential conflict of interest, they should disclose that conflict of interest prior to the discussion and recuse themselves. And that should happen before discussion begins, but if it slips your mind or during discussion you say, oh yeah, I have an issue here, you can bring it up later. So your obligation is to do it as soon as possible. And we'll talk a little bit about this. You almost always, as a legislative body, if it is a legislative matter, you can remain at the table. There are a few instances where you might sit as a quasi judicial body. That's where you're actually like weighing evidence, making that decision, sitting sort of as a court or a judge. You would have to leave if you have a conflict of interest on that. We're going to talk real specifically about what constitutes a conflict of interest under the rules. And then there's some edge cases with regard to legislative matters before the public body, where you have business as a private citizen. That really applies more like planning and zoning, those types of things. Like, hey, I'm a counselor, but I also have a high rise going up next to me. You certainly are not, as an abutter, you have some rights that you can attend to there, despite the fact that you have a personal conflict of interest. You can protect yourself from you can represent your own interests. But that is a very rare case. We'll just leave that alone. So in instances where we have matters before us where there's a conflict on one item but not the entirety, you can just partially recuse. That happens most often on consent agenda. As we say, we batch those together. If we have 20 and you have a conflict on number 18, you should just announce that you have a conflict on number 18, and then you are free to vote on 1 through 17 and 19 and 20. This is important, in terms of if you have a conflict of interest when we are in a non-meeting or a non-public session, as we discussed about, then you should not be there. Even if it is a legislative matter, you should not be in the room. Because just the theory behind this is, once you're conflicted out, you have the rights of any member of the public. So if you sit there quietly, there's no harm in that on a legislative matter. However, you should not be at a meeting where the public has not been invited. So if you do find yourself conflicted on a non-meeting or a non-public session, you really do need to identify that as soon as possible and leave the room. Okay, conflicts of interest. So this is, I've sort of simplified this, but this is taken from the rules itself. So a conflict exists when an officer or elected official takes an action or makes a decision that would affect his or her financial interest of the official's family member, and or the interest of any organization in which the officer or elected official family member is an employee or a member of its governing body. So special rules are just clarification with regard to employment with the city of Concord. If your kid works for the Parks Department, for recreation, you should not vote on anything that comes before on recreation. So your conflict is at the department level. And obviously, if they're in a collective bargaining unit, you really shouldn't be involved with anything relating to collective bargaining that might touch on their union. Family member, just want to call this out, that it is a broad definition. So you have all the ones that you would suspect. I would just call out specifically that it includes any other person living in the same household as the officer or elected official. So if you are housing your brother-in-law's niece, and they're crashing on in your couch, they count as a family member. So anyone who is participating in your household at that time counts as a family member. So we have a conflict of interest, or maybe a conflict of interest, and I just want to take some time on this because I think that there was some confusion the last time we went through this. So we're gonna not pick on anybody real. We'll just say Counselor X has a conflict, and they realize as they see the agenda, I have a conflict on item number 4. They should declare on their own motion before item number 4 comes up for discussion that they have a conflict and they should recuse themselves. Now, let's say Counselor X doesn't, and Counselor Y says, I know Counselor X has a conflict. I know, I know exactly what the conflict is. That counselor can make a motion identifying that Counselor X has a conflict. Either motion, either the motion that you make yourself or the motion that another counselor makes, they should fully disclose to the council at that point the basis for that motion. We do have an exception if there is confidentiality concerns, if there are reasons why you can't disclose exactly why, because of your some professional rules that you have or things like that. You're not required to do that. But what we want is to get out in front of the council. What is the conflict? Why can't this person participate? So let's say after Counselor Y makes that motion, Counselor X says, I still don't have a conflict. Well, if there is a dispute as to whether a conflict exists, the mayor or the mayor pro tem makes a preliminary ruling on that motion. It is a preliminary ruling that is subject to the vote of the council. So if, let's say in this instance, the mayor says, I don't think that there's a conflict and I'm not going to require recusal from Counselor X, the remaining members of the body can put that to a vote, and they can either affirm the decision of the mayor or overturn it. So if the rest of the council says, we don't feel comfortable with this, they can overturn that, and they can make a decision to force a recusal at that point. The importance is you're self-governing, right? You get to decide what constitutes a conflict, governed by your rules and the charter and the ethics ordinance. But there is a process for you to govern yourselves. The best thing to do is for the person who has the conflict to come forward and recuse themselves, but there is a process in place in case there is a dispute. Okay. I'll go through these other ones really quickly. I know you have questions. Elected officials, you can't appear on behalf of another's private interest before a public body. If you are a counselor who is attending a public body that you are not a member of, it is very important that you identify that you are there in your individual capacity, not as a counselor. You want to make sure that at the outset you tell the board and maybe even the clerk, hey, I'm just here in my individual capacity. I am not here as a counselor. You should refrain from stating or implying that you are that your position is that of the council or that you're speaking on behalf of the council. You should not be directing staff or board commission to take any action on behalf. Again, if you decide to go on your own to a board that's not yours, you are a citizen acting on your own, and you need to comport yourself as such. Just a word of warning: if you guys all decide to appear at a meeting and all of a sudden 8 of you are in the room, and this could happen. You could see where the planning board or zoning board would have something controversial, and you might all show up. You can't then testify about matters that could come before your jurisdiction. So if there's an ordinance that ultimately you will be deciding on, you should not be going up and testifying, even in your individual capacity, because you've then created a meeting. For those of you who are thinking about leaving office now after tonight, you cannot appear before the city council for compensation within 1 year after leaving office. So quickly, I'll go through this because I don't think it applies to really anybody except for potentially Councilor Fennessy. You can't represent private interests in a lawsuit against the city. Gifts and favors. You are limited to a $250 limit on one-time or aggregate gifts over the year. Please just don't flirt with that number or come close. If you receive a gift over $50, you're supposed to report it to the city clerk. I implore you, don't take gifts, and please, or try to keep them as nominal as possible. It is a terrible, terrible look, and it is a violation of the ethics ordinance. Disclosure of confidential or other information. I do want to call this out because when we go into non-public, we go into non-public or non-meeting for a reason. These are not publicly available information. You should not be turning around and telling people, hey, this is what we discussed. Here's our collective bargaining position. Here's our, we think we're going to buy X, Y, and Z. Here's what's going on in this project development. That is a violation of the ethics ordinance. So, when we're in non-public, we're in non-public for a reason. So we should please keep the confidentiality of the information that is given to you in those sessions. All right, very quickly, there is a board of ethics that sits to adjudicate ethics complaints, and they report back to you. So if they get a complaint, they will determine whether a hearing is necessary. They will then conduct that hearing, and then they will make a recommendation to you. So it comes back to you in the form of findings that can go from, yep, we didn't see anything here, to we want somebody's resignation. So again, the important thing to this is the Board of Ethics is not something that is separate from you guys. It is an advisory committee that's going to come back to you. All right, last slide. And I just say this as somebody who's seen these things as, while not a rule, professionalism and courtesy go a long way in the conduct of boards and committees. It is just a good way to live. We talked about the mics. These mics are open. Just be aware of that. And written communications. We did not talk about documentation. That may be subject to 91A. With regard to city councilors, it's a little bit odd in that, if you get an email that's just to you, because you're, as we talked about, a city council acts as a whole, as a body, whether that is a public record or not. But just be mindful that pretty much anything you touch could be subject to 91A review. Be thoughtful in your communications. I have gone through too many discovery requests where you go through people's emails and you see just horrible things that people would never want to see out in the world. So be aware that those can be disclosed. So just be thoughtful when you do those things. So that is my last slide before you go to more interesting things with finance.
Question. First of all, do either of the new councilors have a question?
Yeah, I had one small question. Let's see. Oh, where it says another counselor can motion that the counselor has a conflict. What does that sound like? Like, what is the sentence that you say?
Yeah. So you could say, I move that Counselor X recuse themselves because I am aware that they have a conflict of interest. You can then say they have a conflict of interest because I know that the president of this company is Counselor X's son-in-law, and that they're going to receive that family member is going to receive a direct benefit from this, and therefore, I move that they be recused.
Does that require a second, John?
It would require a second. Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Keach, and then Councilor Schlosser, and then I'll go down the room.
Thank you, Your Honor. A quick one, just with regard to that vote on the conflict. Does that require a simple majority or a 2/3 vote?
That is a simple majority. On the mayor's determination,
yes,
it is a simple majority.
Thank you.
Councilor Schlosser.
So when we're in non-meeting discussing real estate or negotiations, and staff are really trying to get a sense of the body, where the council, what advice the council would give to staff regarding negotiations, we often don't take formal votes. Sometimes we take straw polls, like let's go around the table. But sometimes we might be divided.
Yeah.
And so then how does that get resolved? I mean,
so usually when we're asking for recommendations on how to proceed on a particular project, there isn't a formal motion in front of you. You're not deciding anything. What we're just trying to do is get direction from you. So there isn't necessarily ultimately whatever is decided. If you say, hey, we want to go purchase this, or your we're not sure whether you want to go purchase this. Matt may go out, negotiate something, and bring it back. And then ultimately that's out in public and that's a decision. So when we're in non-public and we're asking for guidance, it really is not, there isn't a question before you for debate and for ultimately like a decision. It really is trying to direct staff, what would you like to see at the end of this process? Is it something you're interested in, or is it something you're not interested in?
And then, if I may.
Yes.
And then staff will use their best judgment to interpret what they heard.
Yep.
They'll go act, and obviously any action on a union contract or a real estate thing would ultimately come back to us, and then we vote the way we think is correct.
Right, exactly. And we come to you in non-public on some of these things because we don't want to run, 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction. We want to get a sense from you. And there may be in certain instances where you're not sure yet. You want to see what the final product is going to be. But ultimately, yes, all of that then comes back to you for a actual action, and then, there's a decision, and you have all those processes in place for public hearing and questions and debate.
Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you. I appreciate the one up here for all bodies operate better when the members treat each other with professionalism and respect. There are sometimes when something will appear on the consent agenda, and it's a piece of something, and you didn't realize you had a conflict of interest. The courtesy has typically been that if another member of the council notices it, like in the council meeting minutes or something at the meeting after, that the courtesy is, hey, I think that this counselor had a conflict of interest, and they go, oh yeah, I'm sorry, and we just kind of move on. Is that generally what happens if there is something noticed after the fact from members of the council?
Your obligation is to disclose the conflict as soon as you become aware of it. And so if if obviously we ideally would want to do it beforehand, before any action is taken. However, if you find out later on, oh yes, I did have a conflict on that, you can bring that forward for transparency purposes. That is a practice. Again, what we want to do as much as possible is get out in front of those. So I would advise all of you, please look carefully through the agenda and make sure that you understand any conflicts that might come up, and disclose those early. But certainly, again, ultimately, if you didn't know about the conflict until later, you have to disclose it when you become aware.
Follow up? Generally, in the time that I've been on the council, because we do have the state legislature right here, and when they have hearings, we've done the same action with, while I'm a member of the council, I am speaking on my own behalf, and that extends to the school board as well.
That's right. Any public body that you're going in front of, again, you want to make clear that you are not speaking on behalf of the council. You are speaking on your own behalf.
Thank you.
Councilor Horn, did you?
If we as a body had overridden the mayor's saying somebody should recuse, so ultimately that person did not recuse, that does not negate the opportunity for a member of the public or the council to take that person to the ethics board.
Those are separate processes. And they are not necessarily related to one another. Ultimately, then board of ethics may decide to have a hearing and then come back to you. But the decision on the conflict of interest should be made by you at the table through the processes that we walk through. That does not negate necessarily an ethics complaint. You would have, again, it'd be odd for the council to not find a conflict in one instance, and then at the end of an ethics hearing decide that there was a conflict, especially where at the time they decided that person could vote, but it doesn't necessarily forestall that from happening from the Board of Ethics to look at it.
Councilor Kurtz.
Yes, thank you. I'd like some clarification on written communications. My understanding is that there's some protection over like personal notes taken during a meeting.
There is, right. So personal notes drafts are not subject to 91A. So yeah, when you that is absolutely correct. So your own notes for yourself that are not shared with anybody else, those are exempt.
Great. And I have a follow-up.
Follow-up?
Thank you. And in terms of email communications, does this apply only to our city email accounts?
No.
So our personal email accounts?
Could be. Again, if you're doing public business on it, and if you, it doesn't. This is why, one, I would say use your city email accounts for anything that touches on city business.
Right.
Two, it does not matter. You can't avoid 91A by going to your Yahoo account or to your Gmail account. So if you are doing if it's considered a public record and you're doing business, public business, or you make a communication, if it's on a Gmail, it's on your Gmail. And then we would have to work with you to go through your personal documents to make sure that we're collecting anything that we would need to comply with 91A. So again, I would say, don't do that. You don't want to be in a place where I'm going through your Gmail account.
Understood. Thank you for that.
Text messages.
Mr. City Manager?
So John, real life example. So a counselor, this is a zoning proposal change, and a counselor goes to the planning board and says, I'm representing myself personally.
Yeah.
And I don't like this zoning proposal. I'm vehemently opposed to this zoning proposal. That could have been brought in by staff or a private developer or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And says, I'm opposed to this. I go on record to oppose to this. Planning board says, thank you very much, counselor, but we're approving this. And we're sending it to city council for action.
Yeah.
Now it's before city council in action. That counselor who went to the planning board and said, I'm opposed to this, are they out of the game? Or?
So I think it depends on why they were opposed to it. If they, again, they're supposed to be representing their own individual interests, right? So if they went to the planning board because they said this is going to ruin my view of the State House dome for whatever reason, and they said thank you, counselor, for your personal view on this, and that. Thank you, and that's it. That person can then, I think, the question then is, all right, does that person have a conflict of interest because they have a greater interest in this ordinance or the effect of this ordinance than your average person? So, to give you the lawyer answer, it depends. I think that again, if it that's the perfect ideally, ideally you would say if you truly are operating as an individual and you have an interest that is specific to you that you need to testify on, it's likely that you can't be fair and impartial when this comes back before the city council. I'm not saying that there's no circumstance where that could be, but if you feel strongly enough as an individual and yourself to go and testify against it, you probably shouldn't be sitting on it when it comes back in front of the council.
That happens. That happens.
I'm sure. So. Yeah.
Okay, that's the second.
Thank you, but I'm going back to right to know because I wanted to ask that question, but Your Honor moved on. What can somebody do to unseal a sealed minute?
To unseal the minutes?
Yes, if say, what is the process to unseal?
We're gonna actually we're gonna bring that back in front of you, and the body can unseal the minutes at that point if they have decided that the reason for sealing the minutes no longer exists. So and I know I don't mean to stop this, but on Monday we're literally going to have a non-meeting to discuss this exact process that we're going to go through.
Follow up.
Thank you, Your Honor. Because we're talking about the right to know, right? If somebody said, I have the right to know this, I'm not talking even about councilors, and it's sealed. Do they have to go to their councilor and the councilor make that process for them, or what is that process? But I can wait until...
If the minutes have been sealed by the council, they are considered sealed until the council.
Into the council.
Okay, cool. Good. All right, we're about 60% through. Is everybody good for going forward without a rest break and all that?
Just a 2-minute break.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, 2-minute break. All right.
Well, if we
2-minute recess.
We're ready.
in a meeting.
Yeah, the motion had is someone.
All right, let's reconvene.
I do, Strava. I'll find you.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll find you.
Mr. LeBrun.
Can you make this as fast as possible?
I will do my best.
I have spaghetti waiting for me at home, so go ahead.
Tom has already won me. So, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, I'll talk about 4 items: the budget, financial statements, the tax rate, and then goals and policies. And I will go as quickly as I can. First off, the fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th. The budget document is provided to the City Council on or before May 16th for the upcoming fiscal year. The charter does state that the manager has to submit that proposed budget at least 45 days before the start of the new fiscal year. And then the City Council has up until the 27th day of the following month, from the first of the fiscal year, in order to make a decision. If they don't make a decision, then the city manager's proposed budget comes into effect. Since I've been here, that hasn't happened. As far as I know, I don't think it's ever happened. So, the Finance Committee, which is different than the Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee, but the Finance Committee is a committee of the whole City Council, and the Finance Committee is the one that listens to the budget presentations and public deliberations. We typically have a public hearing held at the end of each meeting, and then the City Council will hold a budget adoption meeting. It's usually after the last Finance Committee meeting. They hold a public hearing, and then they'll take action on the budget. They can adopt it, as was presented, or they can make changes to the budget. That's up to the City Council when we get to that point. The proposed budget document, it's provided electronically to the City Council through the iLegislate agenda system, so you'll have it on your iPads or your laptops, whichever you prefer to use. It is posted on the city website for the public to see. It's posted as a proposed budget initially, and then once it's adopted, it'll be shown as the adopted budget. It's made up of a number of different things. The first part of it is the transmittal letter and the budget in brief. Those really kind of give you a good overview of what's in the budget between the operating and capitals. The budget summaries and staff listings, the resolutions for both the operating and the capital budgets, and the revenue and expense details for both of those. This goes for the general funds, special revenue funds, enterprise funds, and then also the capital and TIF funds. If you read through those first few summary pages and go through that original piece of that summary, you'll have a very good idea of what's in the budget. It doesn't give you all the details, but it gives you a good overview of what's in the budget. When you start looking at the appendices that are in the budget, they'll have all the wage scales for the compensation, so you can see what's going on for all of the unions and the non-union employees. You'll have program change requests. You'll hear the term PCRs on a regular basis, and basically that's the new items that departments are asking for. The manager will support some of them. He won't support some of them. The City Council can accept or reject any of them that he has in his budget. But those are all things that will be discussed during the budget deliberations. You'll also have goals and policies that the City Council has adopted over time, and they update it from time to time. The most recent update was for fiscal year 25, which is, I believe, it happened in December of 2024. There's also supplemental information that gives descriptions of terms, a lot of information for some of the wording that we use throughout the budget or even throughout the year as we discuss finances. We have the pro formas for the general fund, each one of the enterprise funds, and all of the special revenue funds, and those give you an idea of what's in the budget now, typically the fund balances that we're starting with, and then it looks out for the next few years. So it gives you an idea of what is the fund is looking like for the next 4 or 5 years after the fiscal year that we're talking about. We look at that from an administrative point of view, so that we can try to smooth things out as best as possible over the years. Especially when you start looking at things like the water and wastewater funds, you want to, instead of having spikes in the rates, increases and decreases, you want to try to smooth that out. So we look at the fund balances as we go out into the future years, so that we can try to have as smooth a progression as possible. This is just a picture of the annual budget page. This is the city manager's budget. Basically what we look at is we have 6 columns, excuse me. The description of each one of the accounts, whether it's a revenue or an expense account. The next column is the actual from the previous year. So this is the 2026 operating budget that was just adopted by the City Council this past June, and the year that we're in right now. The 2025 adopted budget, so what was the budget that was adopted in that year? the revised budget, so if there were any revisions that occurred throughout the course of the year through supplemental appropriations, and then the projected. So what do we think is going to be the numbers that are going to come in for that budget or that budget line throughout that course of that fiscal year? And then the proposed budget, when you receive it from the proposed category, is the final column. In this case, this is the adopted budget, so this is the 2026 adopted budget. When we get to the actual financial statements, you'll see that these numbers match what's in the financial statements, because I also use the city manager's budget as a example there too. When we get to the financial statements, they're provided to the city council quarterly. We usually show them to or work with the Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee first, and then we send them to the city council the following month. It shows the year-to-date expenditures and revenues for all the operating funds. The format is very similar to the budget document, and the numbers, you can tie out the numbers that are in the budget for each one of the operating funds to what was adopted in the budget that's actually on the website and the city council made decisions on. I do provide an executive summary, then I try to highlight notable items at the beginning of the year. You know, it's usually relatively short. As the year progresses, I try to highlight things that look either concerning to me or favorable. So I try to bring those together. Usually about this time of the year is when we start to see, you know, some trends that are starting to occur as we're going forward. You should get this report in February at the February City Council meeting for the December 31st year end. The actual reports, they show the original adopted budgets and then another column for the amendments. They'll have the month-to-date and year-to-date transactions and the percentage of the year used so far. The encumbrances, if you don't know what encumbrance is, it's basically, you know, when we've said, you know, we believe that we're going to use, if we have a $10,000 budget line, we've put a document out there to a vendor, you know, for 5,000 of that, we record that as an encumbrance, so that money's no longer available to be spent. And then the balance remaining and the comparison to last year. The comparison is the final column in the document, and it's always a helpful review of, you know, what did we do last year at the same time frame as where we are this year. Does that give us any indication of what's going on with our operations? This reports, they don't include the capital or grants and donations. That's something that I've been working with the manager on for a couple of years. We are working on a report. We have something that I think we're almost ready to present to the Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee this spring. Once we do that, and if they're in line with it, and then we'll roll it out to the City Council as we go forward into the next fiscal year. This is just a picture of the financial statement. I did show the city manager as an example. It's a little bit hard to read up on the screen, but the first item is the just the revenue portion of it, and this is as of September 30th, because that's the most recent quarterly report that was provided to the City Council. And then below that is the expense for the city manager. When you actually see the document itself, or when you receive the document, all of the general fund revenues are together in one section, and then all of the expenses are together in the next section. So, but I just kind of posted both of these just to show what the city manager's document looks like. If you look at, you know, all of the original adopted budgets that you have here, you could go back and match those numbers to what I just showed you in the actual budget document. It's just from a few slides previous. And you'll see that you have the adopted budget, the budget amendments. It'll show you what actually changed, the amended budget, which is just the math between the two. And then the current transactions, the encumbrances, the year, what have we done year to date? You know, what do we have left, and then the percentage used, and then the final column is the year-to-date comparison to last year. The next item is the tax rate. Certainly, this is a focus of the City Council when we're doing the budget deliberations, and something that, you know, we pay very close attention to. The amount to raise in taxes is equal to the expenses that we have discussed, minus the revenues. So we have all of the expenses that are proposed in the general fund budget, minus all of the revenues that we're projecting. And then we also have this category called an overlay, and then veterans credits. So we add those two pieces in, even though they're not budgetary items, they're items that we have to include in for tax rate calculation purposes. The actual calculation is that amount to raise in taxes number. We divide that by the valuation, divide that by 1,000, and that's how we get the tax rate. You know, when we're doing the budget, that's the proposed tax rate, and then it's basically the same calculation when we get to working with the Department of Revenue for it. Unfortunately, The Department of Revenue has a much more complicated calculation that includes every single revenue and expense item for all of our funds. So we have to add it all in and subtract a lot of things out, but they have a formula and format that they use to do that. This includes the city portion. We also get the county portion, the Concord School District, and then the Merrimack Valley School District. So all those pieces are included in the tax rate calculations that we put together when working with the Department of Revenue. The City Council approves the budget each year with an estimated tax rate increase. And then the tax rate increase is set by the Department of Revenue in October, November of each year. This page here is basically just a picture of the page in the budget document. So you could go to the website, go into the 2026 adopted budget, and go into the resolution section, and you'll find this page. And it basically shows the comparison between fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26. It shows the total appropriations, again, the war service credits or veterans credits. It shows the overlay amount that we used as part of the budget process. It shows the total use of the funds that we have. It shows the miscellaneous revenues, which is basically all the other revenues in the general fund. And the difference is that amount to raise in taxes. In this case, it's $54,128,000.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Would you mind if I allow the two new counselors to ask questions as we go, if they have them, because they may lose what the question is?
Absolutely, be glad to.
Counselor Caleb?
Quick question.
Sure.
Could you just define what overlay is and I guess how it's determined?
It's on my list. It's on my
Okay,
list.
I think
Yeah.
It took me 3 years to figure it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, and could you also please just explain the difference between the operating and capital budgets when we receive the manager's budget proposal, if you would?
I'd be glad to. So the first thing, overlay, if you think about somebody gets a tax bill, and I look at my tax bill and I say, boy, something doesn't seem right here. I was expecting my valuation to be, $300,000, and it's showing $325,000. I don't think they have it right. So I go over and I talk to the assessing department and say, I think something's not quite right here. And the assessing department will, go in, they'll listen to what you have to say. They'll talk to you, they'll pull out your property record card. And then they'll look at it and say, well, we're showing, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a two-car garage. You got a front porch and a back deck. And you're like, hey, wait a minute, I don't have a back deck. It's like, oh, well, something's wrong on the property record card. So they go through and they make a determination and they say, you're right, the record card shows a deck on the back. We'll take the deck off. That was worth $20,000. So really evaluation should be $305,000. Well, you've paid the taxes on $325,000. So now we have to do an abatement. That abatement comes out of the overlay. As far as operating budget and capital budget, when we look at, you've got a couple of different categories. So in the operating budgets, we talk about the general fund, which really encompasses, all of city administration, police, fire, general services, parks and recreation, all of those general operating projects. And then we also have the enterprise funds, which would be the wastewater and water departments. And then we have special revenue funds, which would be the golf course, the arena, the parking fund, airport. We've got a couple of other smaller special revenue funds that we include in the budget as well. So those all have operating type scenarios. At the end of each year, all of those operating budgets, they whatever hasn't been spent in the funds, they all lapse back to their fund balance. So that money doesn't carry over to the future years. When you start looking at the capital projects, those are things like, if we're going to pave the streets, if we're going to build a new bridge, if we're going to build a new clubhouse, if we're going to build a new police station, those are all capital projects. And once the council approves those projects, then those usually takes a period of time in order for those projects to come to fruition and then be completed. So those don't lapse over the course of the year. It might take 2 or 3 years before that project is completed. Once that project is completed, then we'll bring a closeout to the city council that we do on an annual basis for any completed projects, and then we move forward. Most of the capital projects, or a lot of the capital projects, have funding sources like bonds, grants, donations, different things like that. When you look at the operating budgets, they usually have funding sources that are either user fees or they could be other types of fees. But the big one in the general fund is taxes. So you have, other revenue that comes in the general fund for registrations, interest income, building permits, and then taxes makes up the difference of it.
Thank you.
Enough?
Councilor
couple questions.
Davey?
For what it's worth, I can stay late. I don't know if others can, but it is 7:45.
We go till 11, did you hear?
Yeah, we go to 11.
Just like,
It's fine. Can you walk us through the relationship with the state's system with DRA and all that?
With the state system, you mean for setting the tax rate?
Yes.
Okay. So if we go back, let me go back to. Actually, how about if I address that, because I'll go to the next couple of slides. We'll show a little bit more in the tax rate, and I'll talk about the DRA on that. Let me finish. I can finish this page and then go to the next one. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So when you look at the remainder of this page, you get down to the bottom, the assessed valuation under rate tax determination. You have the assessed valuation, the 5,345,938. That number is in billions. So this shows just in the thousands. So the $1,000 has already been, divided by on this. And then you use the amount to be raised in taxes. You divide those two numbers and you get the tax rate of $10.13. Last year, our tax rate was $9.84. So the difference is 29 cents or an increase of 2.95%. That's basically how we do the calculation, and that's shown right in the website, and we do the same thing year after year. When we do the tax rates, so if you look at the way that the city proposes or does the estimated tax rate, we do the calculation that I just showed you on the previous page. So if you have increased spending, if you have increased or decreased revenues, all of those things go into the calculation of the estimated tax rate that we'll put together. When we get done doing all of this and the city council makes a decision on what they want to support, we go through the rest of the year and then we start working with the Department of Revenue, filling out and completing a number of forms that we have to do. We get to the tax rate setting time, which is usually in the October, November time period. And they have all of our information as well as the information from Merrimack County, from the Concord School District, and from the Merrimack Valley School District. All of those things are incorporated into the tax rates that the city has, because we really have two tax rates, the Concord portion and then the Pennacook portion. The Department of Revenue will take a look at all of the revenues that we have throughout all of our budget operations. Like I said, it becomes more complicated when they put everything together because they include the water, the wastewater, all of our special enterprise funds, special revenue funds. So they put all that together and then they back it all out. So to me, it seems like extra effort, but that's how the process works for us and everybody else. They basically come back to do the calculation. They do the same thing for all four of us. And then they come up with what the rates are individually. So you can see on this sheet that I have here for 2025, we had proposed a rate of $10.18 is what the city council adopted as a proposed rate. And that was with adjustments this year, which was different than most other years. And then when we did the calculation, we came out with the same calculation for the actual tax rate. The Merrimack County came out to $2.54. Concord School District is $14.81 for the school local portion, and then there's a state portion of $1.58. And it's the same thing for the Merrimack Valley School District or the Pennacook portion. They have each one of those same four categories.
Okay. So they've verified all that math that we just did on their end?
Yeah, they verify it. They actually put it into their own system in their own formulas. So what they do is they put it in, and we make sure that everything matches between the two of us, because we don't want to have a surprise and say, well, that number, the 1018 with all the same numbers, they came up with a different number. That's a little bit of a problem, right? So we have to make sure that we match all of those things. Now, the other part of the reality is, there's also the big part of this is the valuation. So the MS1 valuation. So we have this other piece called real growth that goes into it. So any new properties that come on or properties that are taken off the tax rolls get calculated into that new real value. That's all part of the calculation with the assessed values. We haven't had we didn't do a market change in the past several years, but that will be coming up next year. So that new market value change, which John will talk about in a little bit, that is all a main part of the tax rate calculation as well too. So it's trying to explain it, as simple as possible. It is a relatively complex calculation to make sure that we have everything correct, but we go through it, many different times and many different ways, and a number of different people look at it to verify that we have all the information correctly. Did that answer everything you were looking for? You look like it's something else you want.
I think I get it, but we can chat.
Sure.
Line or something. Yeah.
I'd be glad to talk to you again about it. So.
Yeah.
So this is the just the tax information that I have sent out to the city council on an annual basis once we've set the tax rate. We look at the difference between 2024 tax rate and 2025 tax rate. The question might come up to somebody and saying, hey, wait a minute, we just did the 2026 fiscal year budget. Why are we talking about a 2025 tax rate? Because the tax rate is based on the calendar year that we're in, not the fiscal year. So it can be confusing when you look at it and you have to pay attention to it, but the tax rate is in the calendar year, which was just adopted or just set forth in November of this year. So it's a 25 tax rate. Once we do the 2027 fiscal year budget in November, we'll set the 2026 tax rate. So it keeps going year after year on that part too. Again, this is a part of the calculation that I do in the report that I send to the city council after we set the tax rate. And it just shows the differences between the fiscal years and what is the anticipated increase on a $400,000 house. We use a $400,000 house. We've used 350, we could use 500, we could use any number. You're using 400,000 as a, on average property, and I know that that's not the actual median price of any properties here. So we look at last year's tax rate on a $400,000 house. Just for the city portion only, it was $3,936. When we did the city council adopted the budget, they had a proposed tax rate of $10.13, which would have provided for a $4,052 or $100.16 increase. When we actually looked at, we had some issues with the real growth this past year, and we came back to the city council before the tax rate was set, and we had to come up with some solutions in order to remedy the lesser real growth than what we anticipated. So we did that. On top of that, we also had a new contract resolution with the fire department that actually added to the tax rate. So that added 5 cents to the tax rate. So that ended up being a tax rate of $10.18. So that was a total tax bill for the city of $4,072, and then an increase of $136 instead of $116. We do that for the city portion only, and then we do it for the Concord tax rate for the total tax rate, and then for the Pennacook tax rate for the total tax rate, just to show what the differences are overall. Any other questions on the tax rate before I go on to the goals and policies? Okay.
Go ahead.
So the city council adopts goals and policies. The original adoption was several decades ago, but we revisit them every few years to see if there's any changes that need to be made. The most recent change was made in 2024 for fiscal year 25. And probably the single biggest change here was that the city council increased the fund balance goal to 20.5%. The goals cover the accounting, auditing, and financial reporting goals, budgetary and financial management, capital, cash and debt management, compensation, enterprise and special revenue funds, and other funds, especially their fund balances as well. Overall fund balances, expenditures and revenues, and then tax management. These goals are included in the city budget, but you can also, you can find them within the budget. Each year we post them in the budget, so you'll find that in the supplemental information.
Mr. LeBrun, could you just briefly explain what the fund balance is?
The fund balance is if you think about at the end of the fiscal year, we have expenditures and we have revenues. Let's say that our revenues are, $500,000 higher than our expenditures, then that $500,000 in theory rolls down into the fund balance. And so we have we'll call it a savings account or a bank account of $500,000. Over the years, that fund balance accumulates. In our case now, the city has a fund balance of about $15.7 million that's accumulated over many years, and that's the unassigned fund balance. In addition to that, that is what is calculated for the 20.5% fund balance goal. In this case, at the end of fiscal year 2025, on June 30th, we ended up with a final fund balance of 20.6%, so we were just slightly above the goal. Some of the council decisions that have occurred since then would have dropped us down, but that will all kind of come together as we go through the rest of the fiscal year.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Caleb?
I'm thinking about how to word how to ask the question. This is an area where
Yeah,
it's
just
like,
try.
I really don't know what I don't know.
Give me a shot.
Okay, so unassigned fund balance. So it's my understanding that it's important to have plenty of money in that. Contributes to such a great bond rating that we have a savings account, right? Is there, because I there's two things that you could do with leftover money, right? Put it in unassigned fund balance or spend it to offset tax rate, right? Is there some sort of I guess, can you walk me through the calculation as to why we choose one over the other, or if we ever do a little bit of both? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay.
I think I know what you're asking.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you look at what that fund balance is, you're right. It's very important to have a healthy fund balance in order to be able to work through emergencies that the city might have from time to time. And it also provides an indication of the strength of the community or the city operations. So when the rating agencies take a look at us, they look at many different factors. But one of the factors is what is our fund balance level? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? And how strong is it overall? So in our case, we're at 20.5%. The rating agencies actually calculate it differently, and they have it up a little bit higher than we do. But that's our calculation based on our goals. So it is important to maintain a strong and healthy fund balance, but also the city does use that fund balance from time to time in order to offset expenses, manage the tax rate. So in this past year, the city used $550,000 during the budget deliberations in order to manage the tax rate, along with a number of other changes, but to help manage the tax rate to the increase that was palatable to the city council. As we went through and had to make additional adjustments, the city did use, a little bit of additional fund balance in order to help offset, some of the increases that we would have seen with the reduction of the real growth. So, they take a look at doing that. I think the most recent meeting, the city council opted to use some fund balance in order to facilitate some property purchase. So there's a number of different reasons to use fund balance, but it's important to be able to try to manage that use, manage the level of fund balance and manage that use. The city council is the one that ultimately decides, what you're going to do.
Thank you.
Back to the fund balance policy, the city, the policy provides for policies for the general fund, which is 20.5%. The enterprise funds, basically there's calculations based on the revenues, expenses, and the overall need of the fund. We try to manage that again through the pro forma going out over many years. And then the special revenue funds. In the special revenue funds, we have a fund balance policy of about 10% for each one of those funds. Again, we manage them going out over the course of a number of years. I think the only fund right now that doesn't meet that one is the arena fund. All the other funds do meet that 10% at this time. This also provides for spending priorities for capital funds. So we have a list of spending priorities, whether we're using cash, bonds, surplus, anything else we have in those spending priorities. And again, that was revised in 2024. And that is the end of my portion of the presentation tonight.
I think there were some other questions that I know Council Secretary had one.
I think during the conversation when you ask, because you see revised and projected, right? And technically, I don't know in finance world, does projected come first before revised? Because revised means it's already done. This is what we adopted, right? And if there is like say 100,000, because I'm looking at the, I don't know what page it was, but you had a difference of 53,000. Is there a way for us, because when we say it's revised, that means this is what we adopted, that's after the revision, right?
Yes.
And then I see a projected one that is less than the revised one, where that funds goes.
So when we do the budget, all the departments do the budgets, you know, the adopted budget, the revised budget, you're right, that's all in there. And then the projected number is basically us and the departments looking at what they think the expenditures are going to be for that year based on what they've already spent and what we think they're going to spend through the rest of the year. So let's say it's a $100,000 account and they've already spent $50,000. You know, let's say we're in February and they think they're going to spend another 25. So then we would put a projected amount of $75,000 there. There's $25,000 left. So at the end of the year, that $25,000, a couple of things happen. One, there'll be some lines that are overspent, right? So it could have been $110,000 that they projected because there were issues that occurred that they had to take care of. So part of it might go to help offset some of those other over expenditures. But let's say there's no over expenditures, that money will roll back down into that fund balance number that we talked about.
Okay.
Right. So it's so those dollars all lapse at the end of the year, so you don't carry them over for spending the following year. And then in the next year, 2026, we start over. 2027, we start over.
Just a follow-up. Thank you, Your Honor. So you got the scenario when it's under, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
The money goes back to her. But when it's over, do you guys have to come back to the council for that certain amount, like the 25 or the 20 or the 10? Because we already finished the revision, we adopted that.
Right. So typically no, we don't come back to the council for that expenditure. What we do is we work at managing the budget. So, you know, that's one piece of it. And then we have the department, you know, that has a bottom line total. If the department needs to move money from one, if we need to move money from one department to another, then we would come back and relay that information to the city council. If we would get to the end of the year and we've overspent the budget in total, we would have to get a supplemental appropriation from the city council in order to make sure that our actuals beat what the budget, you know, the budget meets what the actuals were. That's happened often in, you know, it's happened at the golf course, you know, a number of years. Sometimes it's hard to predict when business is up, you know, when we have additional expenses for, you know, cost of goods sold, for inventory and things like that. And then we have a couple of other funds. I think we've had it in the water fund recently. We've had it in the arena fund. Sometimes the airport fund's usually been pretty good. But so we'll come back to the city council to get that authorization. And that's a legal authorization that we have to do before we have our audit at the end of the year.
Thank you. Council Foot?
Thank you, Your Honor. Going back to the fund balance, I think it's important to distinguish and help me that we should really only be using the fund balance for capital or one-time expenditures and not supplementing the operational budget. Is that true?
Well, certainly when you use it for one-time expenditures, it makes it easier the following year. So if you're going to use, let's say you needed $500,000 to, you know, increase the amount of paving that you want to do that year. So in theory, you would use it for that one-time item. You know, next year you don't have to revisit that. You know, you go back to your regular paving program and everything's good. When, like this year, we used $550,000 and then increased it by another another $60,000 or so in the operating budget. So now that builds a hole for us for next year. So we have to try to make up that hole somehow as we get into the next budget, and that's where the challenges come in when we're using fund balance in order to offset operations. There are times when it's important to do that, you know, because the city council has a policy directive, or they're creating the policy of how much do you want the tax rate increase to be, and that's one of the ways you can help manage that tax rate increase. For every 1% on the tax rate, You know, that's, right now, that's $546,000. Next year, it'll be a little bit different. So, you know, if you use some fund balance, in this case, that was a little bit over 1% of the tax rate. If we wouldn't have used that, the tax rate would have been higher by a little over 1%, or the council would have had to make other changes to the budget. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next. I'm sorry, Councilor
Oh,
Brown.
yep, I just had just a comment, just in the charter and in the budget. It just says fiscal and budget year of the city shall begin on the first day of January. I know you said the tax rate is the calendar year, but it's just page 8 of our charter and page 617 of the budget that it makes that comment.
the charter actually has the original, but the original budget year, which was the calendar year. There was, and I believe there's further in that charter, says unless revised in the city's ordinances.
Do we want to change that? Change it so it says it's July?
Well, if you want to change the charter, you have to go to the voters to change the charter, so.
Yeah. Councilor Schultz.
Oh, I just wanted, first of all, to thank you. 2 years ago, I asked for a copy of a property tax bill, and you were great to provide one. I would like to request one again for the new counselors, and I maybe just send it to all of us, because
Right.
they're renters.
Whose bill would you like?
Yours.
I get mine regularly. I'm fine.
I think you
We probably
blocked out
blocked
who
out
you
the
shared.
name, huh?
You did.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. I'll try to do the same thing again this year. I will share that
If you
to
haven't
everyone.
seen one, it's really helpful since we make these decisions, knowing that people are,
I was
our landlords get the bill, of course.
Counselor Kretovic did walk me through her own.
Oh, that's
I
very
did.
nice.
Because it's the average.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Thanks, Mr. LeBron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John's all ready.
Okay.
Come on up.
They're squeezing your time. They're squeezing your time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He knows how to.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Councilors. Thanks for having me. Created some slides here. I guarantee I cannot teach you everything about assessing in the assessing office tonight, so I will not attempt and did not attempt in the slides that I've provided. What I tried to do was talk about pertinent information. Most of you are aware that we're currently 2 years into a project to measure and list the city properties, otherwise known as an inspection of the properties, to collect data with an impending 2026 revaluation. So an updating of the assessed values to 100% of market value. I tried to come up with concepts that would be pertinent to the upcoming tax year to help everybody understand. And obviously, we'll take questions at the end. So a key concept I think for you to understand is the meaning of real growth and the meaning of market growth. Brian did touch on it a little bit just moments ago, so this might be in reverse order, but it may help you kind of understand some of the concepts Brian was talking about. I'm going to try not to read from the slides, but honestly, the slides really, I tried to take the concepts and make it in language that would be understandable, so I will read a little bit and then explain. So real growth is an increase in property value that are associated with new construction or renovation. They're typically discovered through reviews and inspections. So we're talking about physical changes to the property and the data that we're collecting for that add value to the underlying real estate. When I say they're discovered through reviews, those reviews are typically related to sales. So we review all sales and typically rely on multiple listing services like MLS for residential sales to look at how they're marketing the property, determine what things add value to the real estate. We will compare that record to our assessment record in our database and make changes accordingly. If an inspection of the property is necessary, we will go out and inspect the property. So there's an instance where a sale leads to a review and a sale may lead to an inspection. We also do inspections for permits and several other reasons. So that's how we discover real growth. Market growth, on the other hand, are increases in property value that are attributed to demand, typically through sales over time. Everybody's aware of what the real estate market, or probably nearly everybody's aware of what the real estate market is doing, particularly on the residential side, outpacing commercial and industrial properties and growth. I think everybody's probably aware of the cost of construction nowadays, for example, and also what demand currently is for rental properties. So these are our three approaches to value, right? Sales, income, and cost. We are constantly reviewing that, and when those market increases are captured, that is market growth. So why is market value, what is market value and why is it important? So RSA 75-8A, the assessor and or selectman shall reappraise all real estate within a municipality so that the assessments are at full and true value, at least as often as every 5th year. The definition of full and true value is market value. So no matter the tax year you're in, your assessment must be indicative of market value. What is market value? Market value is defined as a willing buyer, what a willing buyer will pay a willing seller for a property, both buyer and seller acting knowledgeably, prudently, and neither being under any obligation to buy or sell with normal exposure time. You got to market the property typically. However, we are constantly reviewing properties to determine if the sale price is indicative of market value. Those market value transactions are the ones we're looking at for setting things like the equalization ratio and the assessments when they're indicative of 100% of market value. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose right now. I'm sorry for that, but hopefully when this all, there's only 4 slides, and I think when they all come together, it may make more sense. So, why is my assessment higher or lower than market value? And I underline lower because with growth in the market, you typically see assessments that are lower than market value. So annually we do an annual sales analysis. It's also known as a ratio study. They're completed by the assessor and viewed by the New Hampshire Department of Revenue to determine the overall median ratio for a city. So just a reminder from moments ago, by statute, all assessments must reflect fair market value, but we call them assessed values. The median ratio or equalization rate shows how close the assessment is to market value. How do we determine that? For a sale, we take the assessed value and divide it by the sale price, and that gives us a median ratio. So we can take the sales of all property types in Concord, organize them by a property type, and look at ratios, and then pick a median out of those ratios, right? So we can tell if certain property categories are outpacing others, specifically based on sales. And again, just to reiterate, we do also look at income, like rental properties, investment grade properties. We also look at cost, always. So what is the difference between an annual statistical revaluation versus a 5-year full measure and list revaluation? I think this is important because I think it's important to understand where Concord's been and where we currently are and I guess the way I manage the assessing office. 2004 through 2021, Concord Assessing Department conducted annual statistical revaluations and called them updates, which captured all real and market growth annually. So the median ratio for those years was at or near 100% every single year. That meant when assessment reports were provided to City Council every year, we reported on real growth and we reported on market growth, and we could tell you I'd say at the best guess what was attributed to each. It's really easy to determine the growth when you do data changes. It's not always easy when you're doing a market adjustment on top of it. When I came here in 2022, my predecessor had completed the 2021 revaluation. So that is actually the assessed values as they stand today are base year 2021. If you remember back a couple slides ago, I said statutorily a municipality is required to do an update at least every 5 years. 2026 is that 5th year. That's why we're doing a revaluation this year. So 2021 through 2026 was a 5-year, and the Concord Assessing Department moved away from annual updates and is on a 5-year revaluation cycle. updates will be performed when the distribution of property value is inequitable by property type. The annual median ratio fluctuates based on market activity. Our median ratio is currently 64.4%. That is the median ratio for 2024. We are currently working on our ratio study to look at, again, we take assessments divided by the sale price and determine a median ratio. That is a report we complete and provide to the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue has their own mechanisms for scrubbing the list, and they ultimately determine the median ratio for the city of Concord. A median ratio of 64.4% does not mean we have a distribution problem, and I will try to explain that. Because we can look at ratios by property type, then if all property types are performing at the same level, then we don't have a distribution problem. The reason to do the update between revaluations would be if you had a distribution problem, you could reassess a segment of property types to bring them into the median ratio so you don't have a distribution issue. So maybe a hard concept to understand, but it is, I think, something important to understand, so we understand why we went to a 5-year revaluation process. My goal with doing a 5-year reval was to get appraisers back on the streets into properties and doing cyclical inspections. So the next point here, full measure and list is a systematic inspection of all city properties to collecting and correct property-specific data. We began this process in 2024 and it's ongoing. This process was not done for 34 years here in Concord.
Jeez,
So
that's crazy.
largely because it was a process that wasn't funded. What my attempt was to do is have our own staff complete those inspections over that 5 years between revaluations. So instead of focusing on updating our values to 100%, if we don't have a value distribution problem, our concentration would be on in the inspection of property to maintain our data. Vision Government Solutions is currently in Concord. They've been here for 2 years. They're out there on the streets with their inspectors. We do some inspections ourselves, and we also do an oversight of their inspection process. Once they are done and we complete the revaluation, it will be our in-house assessors that are out doing the inspections on the 5 years before the next revaluation. That's what we're doing with our time. And I think it's a better use of time and assets. I mentioned the revaluation in 2026. All city properties will be assessed at or near 100% of market value. That's the goal of the revaluation. Some final thoughts. The value of a property is a statutory mechanism used to distribute the taxes fairly and equitably. I want to make it clear to anyone here that may think otherwise, we only do value work in the assessing office. We don't set tax rates. Brian showed the calculation. It's the last bullet here under final thoughts. The total group budget divided by the total tax assessed value is the tax rate. So we're half of the equation. We don't collect taxes, we don't bill taxes, we do value work. And we try to assure that the distribution of the tax burden is fair to all taxpayers. Real estate market activity over the past 5 years has shown further distribution shift in value from commercial industrial to residential. That is a trend we've been seeing for quite a while in Concord, long before I got here. It's a fact. Based on market data, it appears lower value residential homes, specifically manufactured homes, condos, and lower value, lower square footage single family homes will see the largest value increase as a result of this revaluation. Multi-family and apartment complexes will also see a significant increase in value due to their investment grade income streams due to demand, as shown in market rents. I think everybody's aware where rentals, quite frankly, rents nowadays are higher than what I'm used to seeing as mortgages and paying as mortgages, so.
Thanks for saying that.
However, even though I have this news on maybe as much as, if I could pick a median increase, which will be no median increase for Concord. Again, it has to be the fair distribution of the tax load. So not everybody's going to increase 30%. But I think if you took a median increase to the current assessed values, which are base year 2021 to 2026, you're going to see on average about a 30% increase if you were to blend them all together. But like any revaluation, it's anticipated that a third of the assessments will increase, a third will decrease, and a third will largely remain the same. That's always the result of a reassessment. Again, it's a redistribution so that property taxes are shed across the municipality into the taxpayers fairly and equitably. That is, I believe, all I had. Yep, that's all I have. I just want to mention one thing so I don't forget at the end, and then I'll open it to questions. There are many, many, many resources available to taxpayers and to you as city councilors on our assessing website. If you can't find what you want, our doors are open. We answer the phone every time it rings. We will return emails. But a couple of things I did want to mention to you, to new counselors and to existing if they're not aware. We do have a page specifically dedicated to the citywide revaluation project. If you go to the department and you go to the assessing, it's the first drop down. That information is there to provide information about what we're doing, but also to tell you what neighborhoods we're working in and where we're currently at. Under quick links, I want to point out there's many, many things under quick links, but one thing I'd like to encourage anyone who hasn't done so, there's a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that's in PDF format called Assessing Presentation. It might be a good thing to look at, again, to get more information about what the assessing office does. But any questions you have, I certainly direct you to our office. We have a very qualified staff that can answer the questions. And with that, I'll open it to questions.
Questions for John? Councilor Davey.
So the annual evaluation you've been doing is like what you incidentally stumble upon through inspections and people applying for permits and whatever, and that counts for the state's 5-year requirement?
The 5-year requirement is to do a revaluation, to do values anew, so a market value update every 5 years. The inspections that we're doing to, let's say post permit, like you said, is capturing real growth.
Okay, so
we're not doing I guess just to make sure, the other way to look is we're not doing a market adjustment every year.
no.
Yeah.
But then, so then what did you do 5 years ago if you're doing this full comprehensive thing that you haven't done in 34 years to assess the market?
We weren't doing a cyclical inspection process where we're actually going out. Cyclical means a defined beginning and a defined end, and you do everything in between. Concord hadn't done that in 34 years.
Okay.
So we were doing inspections, but we're only doing inspections for sales and permits.
Oh, say like what you have on record. Oh, okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
It's a good question. Thank you.
Councilor Caleb.
Yeah, when is this, so this revaluation process for 2026, what is the timeline, like when is that like done?
So the timeline is a little bit fluid. We're recently contacted, and we do wait for the Department of Revenue contacted us to do what's called a startup meeting. We're working on dates for that currently. The full measure and list started in, I can't remember, I can't even believe I didn't write down, June or July of 24, and is currently ongoing, the inspection aspect, the measure and list. The revaluation work will be starting, I say very soon, but taxpayers won't see that. A lot of that's done. It's analytical, it's statistical, it's done by qualified supervisors with Vision. Again, Vision Government Solutions is largely doing the work. We are in a supervisory role. We will have our hands on the revaluation because we will be the ones here. They will defend it, I say at a first level, if people schedule informal hearings and abatements, but we will be here for the next 5 years supporting that value. So we will be very involved.
Thank
So
you.
it's hard to put a time frame. I'll say this. Brian mentioned that the fiscal year is different than the calendar year, and when explaining the tax rate, we actually work on a tax year. Effective date of value for all values for assessing purposes, April 1. So the tax year is April 1 through March 31st. But the tax rate, as Brian mentioned, is not set typically till November by the Department of Revenue. So we have till about November to finalize values from the prior April 1st. So I would say sometime in August, we'll probably be finalizing the numbers and having informal hearings, but the values won't be truly final until the tax rate set and bills go out. However, one side note, there's a new RSA where we must notify taxpayers 45 days prior to their bill of their new value. So we are aware of that.
Councilor Horn.
I don't think I ever realized that the income, you said income applies to the assessment. So if I had my 4-bedroom house is assessed at a certain amount. If I had the exact same home but I split it into two bedrooms that I have rental income on, then that would be in a lot, or it would be a higher assessment due to income in that.
It's a complicated answer. So it's not common that assessors will assess based on income. It's easier to look at sales because of the data we collect physically from a property. However, given the current market and the rents the way they are, all of a sudden apartment complexes are becoming investment grade properties that REITs and investors are investing in. We have, just like an appraiser doing an appraiser, we are going to look at which approach to value is most indicative of fairness. So we will be looking at income. I can't say we will use income if sales are comparable, but with any income producing property, we would look at it. And just like any new construction property, we do look at cost.
Councilor Kurtz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. And so you just rolled through a bunch of different year structures.
Yes.
And then 45 days before and when a tax rate is set for homeowners. When, what month, and what calendar year might I put a star in my calendar right now, double check your tax rate so you can prepare? And is it going to be rolling, or is there like a day you have in mind when everyone in Concord is like, I better figure it out? Because I literally, and I'm on this council, we've been talking about it for a while, I have no idea at this moment what moment in actual time we are talking about.
So,
not to be dramatic, but I'm really lost at the moment.
A good
for
job
when.
without being dramatic.
Well, I mean, that's a natural gift of mine. So.
Reasonable question.
I'd say,
And I'm not trying to like pull.
yeah,
into the fire, I'm
I'd
just
say
trying to get a
value-wise, as far as the new assessed value, I'd be shooting for late August, early September
of 2026.
of 2026.
Okay.
The tax rate will not be set until all the documentation, our office and the finance office turns it into the Department of Revenue. We have an idea what the tax rate is. We do not set it. It's up to the DRA. Typically, that is mid-November, Brian?
Usually we set the tax rate around the first week of November. The last week of October is our goal, but first week of November. This year it was a little bit later, but we typically try for the first week of November to get the tax rate set so we can get bills out as an early Thanksgiving gift to people.
And when a value notice is received, because there will be value notices mailed out to taxpayers and it will be also posted, we are required to, do not use a prior tax rate when calculating your tax bill. It will be all over that letter you receive and people will still do it. When you add 30% to the value, like I said, if that's the average of what we're ending, or when you add value to the assessment, all things remaining the same, your tax rate will decrease.
Councilor Lasso, I'm sorry, do you have a?
No, I just want to reinforce that and add to that, and that's why it came up, is that, that is a cautionary item, is that a lot of people will try to take, if your property is assessed at 400,000 and now you have, a 35% increase in your property value, obviously you take a look at the entire increase in property values for the community, and let's say it's, 32% increase in its entirety. In theory, the tax rate goes down by 32%. So if your property goes up the exact same 32%, your tax bill essentially stays the same. If your tax bill goes up more than 32%, it will go up a little bit more than what that average was. If it goes down a little bit less, it will go up a little bit less than what that average is. So it's just a lot of people will take that new valuation and apply the old tax rate and say, my tax bill is doubling.
Yeah.
That's right.
You got to be careful. You can't do that. You have to wait for the new tax rate in order to do that calculation. And that's something that, I think a lot of people just end up doing because that's the tax rate that they have. But the value will come out in August, September, whenever that comes out, and then you'll see the tax rate. You won't see that until the DRA sets it in November. In that time period in between is when the complication sets in.
That's when people will be really dramatic.
Councilor Davey.
Is there any chance we can turn this into an animated graph?
Pardon?
Is there any chance we can turn this into an animated graph?
An animated graph?
Yeah.
We can come up with some sort of a calculation. John and I have been talking about this because we know that is going to be a misconception that a lot of people have. And so we've been talking about, we want to make sure that we come back to the city council a few more times during the course of this year, during an actual council meeting, to talk about the real growth changes that are happening, to talk about the measure and list changes, and then to talk about the market value changes. And when you look at all of those things and then look at what the impact is potentially going to be, with the equalized valuation that John has put out there, you have a sense of what the overall change is going to be, but we don't necessarily know it by specific categories. And then when you look at that and compare it to the tax rates, and that's where you get into the difficulties. And you want to be careful not to say it's going to change exactly, because the tax rate will change based on the value change, but then we also have a new budget that will come in place, so that will have another impact as well. So there are several different factors that will play into it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
Councilor Teach.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. LeBrun, just a suggestion or an ask, if I could, in that same thought, if you could, excuse me, spend some time maybe educating the public how potentially commercial values could go down and residential goes up, because that confuses an awful lot of people, and that'll be the first question I get.
It does confuse a lot of people, and if you've been around this for a number of years, you recall back in 2003 and 4, there was shifting between commercial and residential, and wherever it shifts down, those people are thrilled. Wherever it shifts up, those people are not happy, and it's happened in varying ways over the years between commercial and residential. So we will put something together and try to do our best to try to explain it as best we can. Have something on the city council agenda a few times, and then we can probably put something on the website to try to see if we can get something in some sort of picture that kind of explains.
That would go a long way. Thank you.
Councilor Schultz.
This the sample $400,000. That's a good start, but I want to see a bell curve and
We talked about doing that exactly.
Cool.
Follow-up. I think that was a follow-up, Councilor Davey. Councilor Schultz.
So fair market value is something the DRA works with the city to ensure happens. And is there any discretion, maybe I should just say what I always say at council meetings anyways. If we wanted to, well, I guess if it just does fair market value is not discretionary, I guess is really what I'm asking.
It's really not the DRA, it's statutory.
So that makes total sense.
Yeah, it's the law.
I have another question, but I'll have to brew on it and ask it later.
Okay, Councilor Brown.
Yes, so it's sort of two parts. I'm just, if because we're looking at other municipalities, the mobile homes, and you said it here, that they're gonna increase. So if an elderly person has an exemption, and let's say now, based on the rate, and if the value of their home goes up dramatically, will that affect their exemption?
Yes and no. If everything stayed the same, yes. But annually, it's going to happen very soon. We meet with the Tax Exemption Policy Committee to make recommendations to adjustments for our exemptions and credits, knowing what's coming. There was some statutory changes for our veterans exemption that need to be discussed, and probably adjustments being made that we will recommend to TPAC. And also knowing that values, we're going to take our best guess, quite frankly, because unfortunately we do have to set those adjustments to exemptions and credits before we know what the values will be. We're gonna take our best shot at that, and then we may have to make adjustments next year. But the idea is, obviously, I would believe it would be on City Council and the members of the Tax Exemption Policy Committee to probably at least maintain the level of exemption we currently have, and then adjust from there.
Follow-up?
Yes. So when would you recommend folks apply for exemptions in order to be considered, to have that considered for their tax bill?
They have to apply before April 15th.
Before April 15th, okay, all right.
Okay, Mr. City Manager? Oh, I'm sorry,
done?
Council Secretary.
Yes, I do have a quick question, because there is 5 years of evaluation. I'm looking at a house to buy, and this person added, I'm just giving a scenario here. Some stuff during the last inspection or assessment that happened. But the realtor will tell you, okay, and this is all estimated, your tax estimated is this much money. Because the agent that is selling it literally added more of the additions. But in the addition, they didn't tell you that this when they, okay, you see where I'm going?
I know where you're going, yeah.
Is it possible for somebody to ask a city staff or somebody to look at it so that they can calculate, to not put themselves into a situation where when the evaluation come and then it's, how can you determine that?
I will say yes, but it's a little bit complicated because if they don't own the property, we don't have access to it. But we can, an assessor with knowledge should seek to verify. So if we, even though the sale hasn't happened, if a member, if we have knowledge and someone says there's potentially something here that you should see, we probably would look at if it's listed on MLS to determine whether corrections should be made to the property record card. Beyond that, if they just want to know, if I buy this house and I buy it for this much, what could my tax bill be? We could make that estimate.
Just follow up. Thank you, Your Honor. Because I have seen where people think, okay, my tax will be 8,000, and then they go buy it and it's now 12,000 or whatever, and they like, oh, this is not what and they think somebody lied to them. But again, we don't know what we don't know, right?
It's a realtor.
Yeah,
it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's why I ask if, because somebody might ask me, can we ask city to look into this before I buy?
We
but
get
they
those.
can go through the realtor.
We get those phone calls quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
Follow up again?
Thank you. We were talking about assessing multi-family properties, right? And we know when we assess something and it increase, which we need to get that money from them, no doubt. But we know that it might have an impact on those renters as well, because most often time those property owners or whatever don't take the hit. So whenever a tax is increased, oftentimes they put it, even though you just said some people, or I'm sorry if it's not you, some people are paying more in rent than even some people are paying in mortgage, because of rent is just so much money. What? You don't have an answer, because those are their decision to make based on, yeah.
I think what I'll point out is, again, state law is that we assess at market value, and that's value in exchange. So if the income is what the income is and that property exchanges at a value that's higher because of the income stream, we don't have a choice but to assess it for the value in exchange. So market value is market value. So we can't give someone a break to keep their rent stable or low. Everything we do in the assessing office is governed by statutory requirements. We have to assess that market value.
Councilor Davey, then Councilor Foot.
Thank you.
Do all states require it by market?
I'll say most, not all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Follow up?
Sorry, I had two questions. I thought investment was only considered up to 4 units, or 4 units or more. 5 units or more.
I think when you're looking at a lender, that might be their threshold.
Okay.
But I know it's a little bit of a moving target, believe it or not, in the assessing world. Some municipalities do it differently. I dare to say with rents as high as they are, there's investors buying some, 4, 5, 6, 7. Typically, my father sold a 3-family here in Concord. He sold it to an investor, so it's out there.
Councilor Foot?
Just a comment, I was in City Hall on unrelated business today, and I paid an impromptu visit to the assessing office, and I figured I'd share this because we see you so infrequently, that there was someone there named Joe, I believe, that just was very helpful and very knowledgeable, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You step down. Go ahead. But just one point, because you'll get asked this question by the community, is that the process that John is going through and to gather all this information, the city council is not going to collect 1 penny more in money. This brings in no additional revenue. You're not going to have any additional money to spend on taxes at all. So people think that because their values went up and they're paying more in taxes, that comes to you, the city council, the school board, and you now have that money to spend. You have 0 more to spend. All it does is redistributes it's the budgetary changes which drive the increase in tax revenue that actually comes that you have ability to spend or decreases. So, but you will say that 100 times in public, and people will still ask you the question, when you do this and my value went up, what are you doing with all that additional money? Well, there is not 1 penny more. So just so you know.
That's where
Yep.
a visual would
That's what
be so helpful to us. Just that concept is so hard to
And that's why
grasp.
we do videos and we do public forums. We do this all the time, and we do visuals. Matt, you're up.
Mr. Walsh?
Good evening. So I'm here to talk to you about capital improvement programs in the TIF district. I'll note that John and John started with words, and then Brian added numbers, and now I'm adding pictures to the presentation. So here we are at 2.5 hours in. So the capital improvement program, as Brian alluded to, there's the operating budget, which is salary and benefits and fuel and utilities and paper clips, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the capital improvement program. And the capital improvement program deals with those pieces of the city infrastructure that we purchase that have a useful life, generally of more than 5 years and cost more than $10,000. They are typically public facilities, police stations, fire stations, libraries, infrastructure, water mains, sewer mains, drain mains, roadways, sidewalks, things of that nature. And equipment, which ranges all the way from simple lawnmowers all the way up to things like our tower ladder truck, which we just received the new one, which cost us, I want to say, about $2 million if memory serves, which is out being tested right now by the fire department. The capital improvement program is governed by state law. Again, we can only do what the state of New Hampshire allows us to do because we are not a home rule state. It's RSA 674:5, and we're allowed to have a capital improvement program because we have a master plan. If you look at your budget, the capital improvement program starts on page 212 of the 26 budget. We use the state statute talks about a 6-year planning horizon. We actually use a 10-year horizon here in Concord. We go a little bit longer so we have a better picture of what's happening. We've been doing that since 2011. If you look at the capital improvement program, you'll see there's 128 distinct projects. That's a little misleading. Because it's got a 10-year planning horizon, there are 128 projects, but many of those 128 projects have sub-projects in each of those 10 years. So there are hundreds of individual projects of the capital improvement program. The total capital improvement program, which was adopted by the council back in June, which is for fiscal 26 through 35, is just under $600 million. This is straight out of the capital improvement, straight out of the budget. And if you look at this, as Brian mentioned before, we'll see if this will actually work now or did it die. You'll see it doesn't work on the screen. That's unfortunate. So there's the general.
Just a light from the ceiling.
You just need a cat.
Maybe not.
There you go.
Yeah, sort of. Okay. So there's the general fund, which we talked about, and then the individual special revenue and enterprise funds. So there's a parking fund, arena fund, cemetery fund, golf, airport, water, sewer, solid waste, and then other, which are kind of a catch-all for things being paid for by federal grants and tax increment finance districts, et cetera. The part that I really wanted to point out to you was, if you look at capital transfer, which is cash in the general fund. You look at bonds, which we're talking about during that 10-year period. The program talks about $281 million in general fund bonds and highway reserve money. If you add all that up, that's about 55% of the total capital budget, which is just under $600 million. So the general fund is the part that usually the taxpayers are paying for in their property taxes. The rest of it is usually paid for through user fees or other sources. So I wanted to call that out to you because that's a significant number as you're thinking about tax rates and going forward in the future. Any questions on that before I move on to tax increment financing?
I didn't see,
Counselor Brown?
yes, thank you. I didn't see capital reserve funds. Is that where they would be?
No.
Okay.
No,
that's
we
not-
make transfers out of, sometimes we make transfers out of capital reserve funds to pay for capital projects, but capital reserve funds are a different animal altogether.
Okay, so we wouldn't see it on this
Nope,
summary.
you would not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Tax increment financing. So this was put in this year because it's one of the major economic development tools that the city has used for a long time. And it's governed in New Hampshire by RSA 162K. Tax increment financing has been around since 1979, and the city has used it since 1979. And essentially, what you do is you identify an area of the city that you want to either develop or redevelop. You create a tax increment finance district, and what happens is inside that district, you will make infrastructure improvements to facilitate development. You're going to build infrastructure and other facilities, so water, sewer, drain, roadways, sidewalks, bike paths. You might actually build city facilities in there as well, depending on what they are. And what happens is the base value of the district, all the assessed value of the district when it's created, that base value, the taxes on it continue to go to the general fund, which would, the general fund, the school district, the county, the state of New Hampshire. All the new development that occurs in that district or investment in property that occurs in that district, the taxes on that new development or investment in that property gets captured by the TIF district and is used to pay for the debt service and operating costs of it. So that's how it works. And I have a graphic here that I'll show you in a second of how that works. Essentially, right now we have 3 TIF districts that are active, which we'll talk about in a second. For matter of trivia, Eagle Square, if you're familiar with that development back in 1979 was a TIF district. If you're familiar with Capitol Plaza 1 and 2, where the School Street parking garage is, that was a TIF district. And we'll talk about the 3 active districts here in a second. The 3 active districts we have total 333 acres, which sounds like a lot. It really isn't. The city of Concord has just under 41,000 acres of land in it, so only 333 acres are actually in our tax increment finance districts. The total investment that we've made in the 3 active districts right now is just under $46 million. And you can see up there that approximately 23 million of that was actually tax increment finance district funds, either cash or bonds. And then the rest of it was other sources. It might have been the city water funds, it might have been grants, it might have been city sewer funds, lots of different sources, parking funds. To date, in our three TIF districts, we've created just under $130 million of value, and we look at that, essentially every $1 of investment we've made has yielded almost $3 of assessed value, which is pretty impressive. In our fiscal 26 budget, which is our current year that we're in right now, of that $128 million of value that we've created, we're releasing taxes on $3 million of assessed value that's been captured in those districts. And that means there's just about $1.37 million that's flowing to the city's general fund, as well as the 2 school districts, as well as the county and the state of New Hampshire. So why do we do these types of investments? And the answer is, yes, it's all about community vitality and creating jobs and making Concord the community it is, but ultimately this is a tool that we use to create tax base. So that's why we create TIF districts, is to encourage development to create tax base. So the way it works is, as I mentioned before, you establish a district, and so the base value of that district is the pink box here. And as I said before, all the tax revenue that's generated by the base value of the district continues to get captured by the city's general fund, the school district, the county, and state of New Hampshire. Any new development or investment in the district that occurs is the blue triangle. And again, we capture the tax revenue from the assessed value in the blue triangle, and that stays in the TIF district. It's called captured incremental value in revenue. And we use that to pay for the infrastructure improvements that we make in the TIF district to facilitate development, as well as the operating costs of those. If we're plowing new streets that we've built or streets that we rebuilt in that TIF district, the cost of plowing those streets is paid for by the TIF district, for example. And then once the debt service for in the TIF district is fully satisfied, or the purposes for which the district was created have been satisfied, whichever happens first, or by vote of council, all of the value in the pink box, in the blue box, then flows to the city's general fund, school district, county, and state of New Hampshire. Because our TIF districts are so successful, we've been releasing value out of the blue triangle now, which is that $1.37 million that I mentioned before. We've been very, very successful with how we've used TIF to the benefit of our taxpayers. So what are our 3 TIF districts that we have? Well, the first one I'm going to talk about quickly here is called the Nyack TIF District, which is the North End Opportunity Corridor Tax Increment Finance District. The Opportunity Corridor is this area of the city that we've been working to redevelop for decades. That's generally between I-93 and downtown, but also includes parts of Pennacook. In this particular area, you can see that the State House is here on the far right, left-hand side. And this district basically runs from behind the Doubletree Hotel on Store Street, which is the old Holiday Inn. It goes all the way up to Delta Drive and Delta Dental in there. This is the old Concord lumber property that the city actually was involved in acquiring and redeveloping. It's 68 acres in total. The assessed value of the district, the amount of assessed value that's been created in that district to date is about $51.5 million. We release 2/3 of the assessed value and tax revenue out of that district annually, and have been doing that for many years. We released $951,000 of tax revenue out to the city's general fund, the Concord School District, County, and State this past budget. The rest of it is retained by the district to pay for its debt service and operating costs. If you want more information about that, you can look at page 204 as well as page 207 and 208 of the budget that we've adopted. We're keeping this district open for future extension of Store Street North up to Constitution Avenue and South Commercial Street, which is Capital Improvement Project 18. Our next active district is called the Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District. It's downtown, so for those of you who haven't been in town for a long time, the Hotel Concord building on South Main Street was once the site of a property called the Sears Block, which was a derelict building that the city redeveloped about 20 years ago. And as part of that, we built what is the parking garage that's behind there, which is, we got to get a better laser pointer, but it's right there, which is the Store Street parking garage, which is the city's 3rd parking garage. This district's 22 acres. All the stars there are redevelopment projects that have occurred inside of that district. So things like the Bank of New Hampshire stage, things like the new Isabella apartment building, things like the Smile and Bindery building, things of that sort are in that district. It was originally created, as I said, to facilitate redevelopment of the Sears block. It was later instrumental in our Main Street project that we finished in 2017. The TIF district paid for a good chunk of that infrastructure, including burying utility lines on South Main Street, which facilitated things like the Isabella apartment building at 32 South Main Street and the Bank of New Hampshire stage. This district has created $53.8 million of assessed value. 2 years ago, we started releasing value out of it. This budget, we released just under $11 million of assessed value, which is 20%, which yielded about $304,000 in taxes that went to the city's general fund, the school district, the county, and state of New Hampshire. If you want more information, you can look at page, again, 204 of the budget, as well as 208 to 209. Last but certainly not least is the Pennacook Village Tax Increment Finance District. This was established in 2010. It was originally created to facilitate the redevelopment of the former Allied Leather Tannery facility, which is in downtown Pennacook, which became Pennacook Family Physicians, Warren Street Architects, as well as Pennacook Landing Affordable Housing. It was later expanded. It was also created to help facilitate the redevelopment of the Rivco site, which is, I really do not like this laser pointer, which is not too far from the tannery site, which is a 22-acre former industrial site that eventually will need to be redeveloped. We expanded this district in around 2020 to include the area around Exit 17. So if you're familiar with the new Market Basket and Home Goods and the new Concord Hospital up there in Chipotle and all that, that is inside the TIF district. The city actually invested $5.5 million to build the transportation improvements up there that led to that project. The assessed value that's been created inside this TIF district is just under, is about $23.6 million. We have been releasing value out of it for a few years now. In this budget, we released about $3.5 million of assessed value, which is 15% of the total captured value in the district, which is about $110,000 in property taxes. And again, if you want more information, you can look at page 204 as well as 210 to 211 of the fiscal 26 budget. Can I answer any questions for you?
Questions? Councilor Horn.
Will this new revaluation affect that base property tax assessment?
It will probably, I don't want to speak for John, but the reval will affect not only the base value of the district, but also the captured value of the district. So just like it will affect all other property in the city, whether they're in TIF districts or not. Yeah.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, so the Pennacook Village TIF district, that funds the Economic Development Reserve Fund?
No.
Is that,
So
or that, yeah.
So the city has an economic development reserve fund. It has been used as sometimes seed money to get tax increment finance districts off the ground before they start generating revenue. And it's also been used as a tool to help finance certain capital projects in tax increment finance districts. So there's a certain amount of economic development reserve fund money that was invested by the city in the Allied Leather Tannery site. And what is happening is we're very strategic about that. So we put the economic development reserve money into TIF districts as a loan, and then the TIF district pays it back to the economic development reserve, so the council has the resource in the economic development reserve to invest in future economic development projects. So you're going to see that in this particular budget, I can't remember how much it was. It was under $100,000, but we paid back $100,000 of that loan from to the EDR. Sorry, that's slang for the new counselors, economic development reserve jargon. And we've been doing that for a while. We're poised to start doing that in the Sears Block Tax Increment Finance District probably in this coming budget year because there was a couple $1 million of economic development reserve that was invested in the Sears Block TIF District years ago to help facilitate redevelopment of, well, the Sears Block, which is now the Hotel Concord building.
Follow up? That EDR, that
Mhm.
slang, that is that's reflected in the MS9. Is that the same one?
I'd have to defer to Brian about which report it actually shows up in, but it's a reserve fund that the city has, yeah.
It's in the MS9.
Thank you.
Set?
Good.
All right,
Okay.
Mr. City
I'm up
Manager,
next.
thank you, Mr. Walsh.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
A lounging attitude. Mr. Walsh, my lounging attitude reflects the hour and not your presentation.
I'm not offended, Your Honor.
Okay, so I'll move pretty quickly through this because, and this is really focused on the two new folks, as everybody else is pretty much aware of most of everything that I'm going to say. So I just wanted to give you my perspective on my role and the interaction with City Council. So I'll go through this pretty quick. So the real work of the governing body is governing. This is what this is again, if you were a poli-sci major or something like that, you would know this. You make the tough decisions, you establish service levels, you steer the direction of the community, and you work with colleagues and staff. As a counselor, you have, and you've heard this as we've gone through, you have no power or authority individually. I want to make sure I say that because I'll be saying that again several times to you, likely individually, but if you understand that from day one, you'll be in good stead. It's all done collectively of what the city council comes up with in terms of policy and your appointments of the manager, policy directions, and if you can work together, you can get things done. If you can't work together, you're not going to get anything done. That's my experience, and that's proven true year after year. Protect the brand. The city of Concord is a brand. You represent that brand. How you play a key role in the tone of the organization and the community is very important. How does the community view that? What's discourse look like at city council meetings? How are disagreements handled? How do you treat people in the community? How do you treat staff? How do you treat each other? That's very important. The community is paying very, very close attention to that. Protect the brand again. Businesses are paying very close attention to that. If they see that it is not being done properly in their minds, that affects their ability to decide whether or not to invest in the community and to stay in the community, build jobs, build tax base. And they watch and observe city council meetings. They pay very close attention to what you do, how these meetings are handled, how you talk to each other, how you talk to staff. Non-public conversations need to be kept confidential. And again, as you know, we're out hiring a number of folks right now. They're watching these meetings. They're watching to see the way the city council purports itself and actually manages the community and makes decisions to decide whether or not they want to be part of this community. City council demonstrates a mistrust for staff or each other. The community wonders whether or not they should trust the organization and the decisions that you make. You have to understand, and I know you do, that what you say and how you say it matters a great deal. And newly elected city councilors need to understand they represent the organization now as an employer. So when you're dealing with the employees, you are the employer. And I am your agent. So you're the ones making decisions on contracts and policies and everything else that goes forward. The roles of the city council, you establish service levels through the budget. You establish the goals and policies through a collaborative effort. You hire the manager. You keep the manager informed about the community interests and concerns. You refer constituents to staff and so that we can help you follow up. And you communicate through the manager and their designated process. So whatever process the manager sets up, that's how you communicate to the organization and to staff. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Regular communications and same information to all members of the council. So if I get information, if somebody wants information, and I think it's pertinent to the entire community, to the organization, I will send you all that same information. Everybody has the same information going forward, so nobody is at a loss. Accessibility, you'll be accessible to me about when you need things. I'll help you do some problem solving and partnerships, working with whatever organizations that you're working with. I'll be glad to participate in that. What my expectations are that we'll have regular communications. When you have a question, as the issue arises, you'll let me know. That you'll respect the roles that are established in the charter, and you'll respect the workloads and the priorities set by you. So essentially, you're respecting each other and what you come up with, and you'll work within established protocols. So the roles and associated activities, as I see them, I won't read these, but it's strategic vision. You have a responsibility as a trustee and a steward. You're a constituent advocate, and you're a decision maker. You're a community builder, and you provide oversight to the city manager and the finances and the audit. And these are the helpful links that I thought you'd be interested in working with General Services. These are many of the questions that you're going to get from constituents are related to winter policies, trash collection, spring leaf collection, street tree policies. You can find them in these links. All this information is there. I'll go back to one piece. Respecting workloads, priorities set as a whole, and working within established districts. In the agenda that you have, you'll see there's a whole listing of department heads. There's a listing of staffing levels. That's staffing levels come right out of the budget. The listing of department heads are making a change this year, and this will be true going forward. In the past, I've set up a system where city councilors can go either directly to department heads for questions or department heads and division heads. I'm changing that to now just department heads. You will not go to division heads. You will come directly to me, and then or a department head if you like, and then they will determine which way you go from there for all communications. And there's one exception to that, and that is Councilor Brown. Councilor Brown, everything you do going forward will come directly to me.
Awesome.
You will not. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome.
So you will not be communicating directly to department heads or division heads.
Awesome, thank you.
Any questions?
Questions for the city manager?
Actually,
Council Brown?
yes, are you going to mention RSA 41:9? That is that the governing body is responsible for the oversight and establishment of internal control policies and procedures. Okay, well,
I'm following the
you're
chart,
just
the city
doing
chart.
the manager stuff, okay.
Okay. Councilor Schlosser?
But my understanding, it's your expectation that if we communicate with the department head, we keep you in the loop.
Absolutely.
Or keep the supervisor, whoever we're talking to, we keep the supervisor in the loop.
Right.
That's
So
sort of,
and that's what it is. So essentially what we'll have, let's use an example. You have a question about a water service or something like that. You would contact Jeff Hoadley for the water. He would 99% sure say, you know what, you need to talk to the water folks. I'll put you in touch with them. And then you continue direct discussion with them to resolve something. Instead of going directly, trying to figure out who you need to go to, we'll do that for you and then establish that connection. And that way, Mr. Hoadley be aware what's going on and I would be aware what's going on.
Thank you. Councilor Caleb?
Yeah. And it's my understanding, because last time we met, I asked this. You said it's going to be covered in the orientation, but
Yep.
stressed me out, so I asked you ahead of time.
Sure.
So when communicating with staff, and now that it's just department heads, to also just CC you,
Yes.
right? So that they don't get in trouble for like not, you know what I mean?
I would appreciate what I've always asked all counselors to do that. You're gonna forget, right? So they know
Not
they,
forget.
what they will do,
Okay.
they will then they're all instructed to contact me and let me know that you contacted them.
Yes.
So, but I prefer that you let me know
Makes
in the
everyone's lives
beginning.
easier. Okay, thank you.
Now, just so you know, in many places, everything goes through the manager. It does not go to departments. I decided to open it up to department heads. So, because I think it would helps resolve issues quicker. I don't want to become a bottleneck for things, and I think once you form that relationship and you know the answers to things, then it'll be much easier going forward.
Any other questions for the city manager?
Oh.
Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead. This is your night.
Yes. Well, no. This presentation was very straightforward. But just to what you said about only like communicating with department heads going forward. What if there's a circumstance in which like a staff or somebody under a department head comes to, I don't know, ask me a question or ask a counselor a question? Is
they
that
won't.
they won't do that, okay. Gotcha.
Let me just clarify,
Counselor Horn? Okay, Counselor Brown?
just, when I have questions with Janice, I don't need to go to you to ask Janice for things.
If
Like
it-
I go to Janice for maps or sending out emails, I don't need to send you first.
You need to let me know. Just let me know.
Oh, I'll CC you.
But just for, I think Janice, because Janice does represent a
Administrative.
support for the city council. But if it's asking her to do something or do some research, then it needs to come to me first.
Clarification.
Clarification?
So like if I'm asking Janice, would you please forward this to the council? Do you need to be on that email? Okay.
No, she'll send it to me
That
anyways.
was me. Counselor Horn?
Is there a list of the department heads and their contact info, just a succinct list somewhere?
Yes, in the agenda, the agenda in Granicus?
Yep.
There's a whole listing in there. And it's
Okay.
also, we usually put it in the budget too, but I gave you an updated one, which has all the phone numbers and the contact numbers and everything. So it's really accessible.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the city manager? Counselor
Last
Taylor?
one. Last one. Sort of not really a question, just something that had been on my mind, unrelated to staff stuff. Going back to just like general conduct. So I post a lot on social media, and obviously aware at all times. I'm representing myself, and now I'm in this role, so that is important to be professional. I was thinking about whether or not to put like a disclaimer like on my page, like views are my own. Views do not represent that of the city of Concord or the city council. Does that seem wise? I don't know.
It probably does, but it probably doesn't mean anything.
Well,
It really does. When
yeah.
you get into court, it won't mean anything.
Gotcha. Yeah, no,
No,
but
but it
when
makes
people
sense.
see
Yeah, so
I'm
right.
posting as me, I'm not talking about like a legal problem, but just like
Yeah.
people will see I'm posting as me.
Right. But it's a very good thing. But I think it's just like when you go before a board,
Yeah.
you can say 1,000 times you're just representing yourself, but they know you're on the city council. It's like when I go to a meeting too. They know I'm also representing. You can never step out of that.
No.
But it wouldn't hurt to do it.
Any other questions?
Very helpful.
All right, thank you.
Thank you
And
very
this,
much.
and this whole evening has been incredibly helpful. Thank you to the city manager, thank you to Mrs. LeBrun, Mr. Conforti, to John. Who did I miss? Mr. Walsh. Thank you all.
The clerks who come out the whole time.
I've spent the last,
And we'll repeat any and all of this.
the
which
last
we
3
are
hours and
confused
12
about,
minutes,
whatever we
right.
call
That was
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we'll talk
fantastic.
about
Crash course.
Yes.
Oh, hold on.